Everything starts in a super creepy place where this kid just sighs and waves his hand, totally bummed that his plan failed because he was supposed to be wielding a sword as heavy as a literal neutron star. Staring at the boiling liquid, he wondered if he'd ever really master this magic, knowing he'd never be able to keep up with the big shots without it. Trying to shake those thoughts, he shut his eyes tight and took another huge breath. He threw his hand up, sparked his flight magic, and zoomed into the sky like a pro. It had been forever since he'd been to the big city, and he decided it was finally. One guy got nervous and claimed he didn't know the area, while the second guy suddenly remembered he had stuff to do and bailed. The third one said he couldn't risk. In a split second, the air rips wide open and a massive portal appears, totally catching the kid off guard. His jaw dropped and he completely froze, just staring at the portal and wondering what the heck he was even looking at. Out of nowhere, a magic circle glows under his feet and lifts him toward that weird object, but he knows it isn't flight magic since he's usually a total pro at flying. As he got closer to the object, he couldn't stop wondering where this crazy glitch in time and space even came from. He freaked out and geared up for a fight, knowing that if this weird thing started sucking everything in, it was game over. When suddenly a tiny hand popped up right in his face and reached out to him. The kid stumbled back in total shock, clutching his face and chest while panicking and asking what was going on. Right then, a girl stepped out from around the corner, walking totally chill with a soft smile on her face. The guy felt pretty bummed and turned bright red, but he was still shaking with fear as he asked who she was, only for her to smile and say she was Risea, the goddess of spells. Once the cute girl introduced herself, the whole room went dead silent, and while the guy just stood there speechless, she looked right at him and flashed a smile. The guy turned away, trying not to crack up because he thought her calling herself a goddess was a total joke, but she just stood there with a super calm smile. Trying his best not to laugh, the guy cleared his throat and asked her what she was even talking about. The girl apologized and dropped a huge secret. She's actually a goddess from another world looking for a hero to summon. She flashed a smile and told him she only wants to be with the strongest person in the world, then asked if he was really that guy. He got a total case of the chills, wondering if she actually wanted to tell kids stories about a goddess summoning heroes to another world. God totally catches him off guard by saying this isn't a fairy tale, and the kid just freezes up, shocked that God actually read his mind. He worried she'd actually bypassed his magic to read his mind. But then the guy introduced himself as Razel, the absolute strongest person in the world who says no human can ever beat him. He looked at her and asked to join her hero's journey, knowing that with her by his side, he could take down even the toughest enemies. The goddess was totally hyped and asked if he was actually coming, thanking him for being so pumped, while Razel just felt super awkward about the whole thing. Razel asked her what he was supposed to do next, and Risea told him the king's orders were to take down the demon king. So even though he agreed, he secretly couldn't believe a single word she was saying. Regia flashed a grin and pointed Rosella toward the weird rift she'd just stepped out of, asking him if he was finally ready to start their journey. The guy agreed without a second thought, and just as Risea started jumping into the action, a massive crack suddenly echoed through the square. Roselle's body started crumbling into pieces, and the boy totally panicked when he realized he was getting sucked right into the mess. The kid knew he had to risk it all to win, so he dove right in, while Razel figured fighting back was a waste of time and just let the current sweep him away. Suddenly, Razel felt a weird tingle and snapped his eyes open to find himself in a massive room with Raisha and a whole crowd of people standing right in front of him. Razel looked around in total shock, wondering if he'd actually been transported to a whole new world, while Razia stood behind a guy in super fancy clothes and shook her head. He threw his arms out wide and told the guy that he was the king of this land and the one who summoned him here. Razel looked around and saw a bunch of total strangers, realizing right then that he definitely wasn't the only one who got stuck here. He caught the king asking if only 4 heroes were summoned, and as soon as the guy said yes, Razel knew something big was happening. He took one look at them and was totally shocked by how weak their magic was, especially since these guys were supposed to be the strongest heroes in their entire worlds. Razel was itching to check their stats, but then this smiling guy from another world jumped in to introduce the new characters, so Razel decided to just sit back and listen to the info first. The guy explains that this world is split into humans, half-humans, and demons, but half-humans are super rare and don't really pose a threat to anyone. Razel realized everything was going down exactly like back home, and then the guy got super serious, claiming demons were the ones behind all this trouble. He says humans have been fighting demons forever, but lately those monsters got a massive power boost, and now they're totally running the world. That's exactly why they dragged this whole crew together. A hero, a civil servant, a total scammer, a summoned hero, an adventurer, a realist, another summoned hero, a mercenary, He grinned, thinking back to when he trained like a beast to hunt demons and became a legend that every country on the planet thanked. The guy bowed deep and begged the heroes to take out the evil, saying if they just beat the demon lords, they could finally kick back and relax for the rest of their lives. Fraud Grind thought the offer sounded like a sweet deal, and Riol just laughed, hyped to finally flex his power. Banza shouted that since these guys are enemies of humanity, he's gonna... A maid brings out a tray with something hidden on it, and the guy tells the heroes they need to prove their strength first by putting their hands on a crystal ball. They pulled back the cloth to reveal the bullet. This test is just to see if you've got basic combat skills. There's no special formula for what this bullet measures. Raz. This cocky spool decided to go first, laughing about being the first one summoned before he reached out and touched the ball. A blinding flash of light suddenly burst out of nowhere, and Riol was totally freaked out, asking what the heck was going on. Just then a guy runs up to the balloon screaming that it's impossible, and when a confused Rio asks what's up, the man is so blown away by Rio's crazy power that he can't even get a word out. He suddenly shouts that Riola's power level is a massive 4097, which is totally insane. The rabbit is super hyped about the score, while the goddess is just standing there in total shock. Razel wondered if that number was even a big deal. A sneaky scammer was watching the adventurer from the shadows. He fixed his glasses and whispered that it was finally his turn to move. He scanned his hand and saw his power level hit 3,664, but he could tell the official was also a total beast. Banza, with his 3,776 power level, breezed through the inspection and bragged that they could definitely handle themselves in a fight. The guy was super hyped and said this was exactly what they wanted from the heroes. Then he turned to Razel and told him he was up next, so the kid just nodded and stepped forward like a total pro. He walked up to the orb, wondering why it was acting so weird, while every other hero watched him like a hawk. It was super weird that the ball didn't even budge. Razel calmly told the worker that the thing was broken. The guy started apologizing like crazy, looking totally embarrassed. He laughed it. The balloon suddenly popped, and while a confused Razel asked what happened, the worker just laughed awkwardly and told him to double-check his gear for the fight. The second the kid touched him, the guy's face went totally white, as he nervously told the king that the boy's battle power was literally zero. The ruler was fuming and demanded to know if the power was actually zero, and the nervous worker admitted it was true while the crystal stayed perfectly fine. Razel politely raised his hand, because he really needed to talk about how much that device was stressing him out. The king wouldn't even listen and screamed at Razel to get out right now. He yelled that a guy with zero magic could never be a hero, so Razel was kicked out of. He told the king to hold on, insisting that zero was a total mistake since he definitely knew magic, and as he looked around for a solution, his eyes landed on the fireplace and a wild idea finally clicked. Razel leans right in and tells the king to watch his hand as he triggers atomic reconstruction, a crazy move that needs at least 7,000 power units, and it's... The worker totally lost it when he saw the coal had actually turned into a diamond, and his hands were shaking like crazy from the height. Razel smirked and asked the king how he was feeling, then casually asked if everyone finally realized he had magic, making the king absolutely lose it over the kid's crazy attitude. The king totally lost it, yelling that there's no way to turn coal into diamonds, while the boy just stood there confused and asked what he was even talking about. Razel calls it a total amateur move, and just as the kid thinks she's trapped in his world, the king slams him in the chest, screams at him to shut up, and kicks the worthless fraud right out of the castle. Riol just laughed and called the whole situation totally pathetic. Frodo fixed his glasses and smirked, acting like their fate was just so tragic. Banza was losing it because he knew this guy was... Razel was totally shocked and tried to speak to the goddess, realizing that literally no one else here knew this secret move. The goddess just stared at the boy like he didn't even matter while he stood there in total shock, and the king started screaming for the guards as the official bolted out of the room. The knights finally showed up and told the kid to grab his stone. The king banned Raisel from ever coming back, and then he ordered his men to toss the boy out. A while later, Razel is just sitting on the sidewalk while everyone stares at him in confusion, and one little girl even points and asks her mom what's wrong with the quiet guy. The mom told her daughter to look away and not even glance at him, but the little girl had no clue why, while Razel just sat by the fountain looking totally bummed out and whispering to... He kept thinking back to the moment the king kicked him out, and Razel was honestly shocked at how fast they just tossed him aside, sitting there absolutely fuming that they'd even dare to. He suddenly froze and went totally quiet, but then he looked up all hyped and told them they had to change the subject right now. Razel finally hit the road. He knew he needed a game plan for his next move, but right now, there was only one big question stuck in his head. He headed over to the gear workshop, but here's the catch. You can only buy weapons and tools straight from the other people there. Razel walks in and gets greeted by a guy he's never seen before. It feels super weird since he doesn't recognize the dude at all. He drops a massive gem on the counter. The guy asks why he didn't just hit up a jewelry store, but Razel admits the diamond is a total fake and he's terrified of getting busted for fraud. Razel asks if any shops take fake cash, but the guy gets super annoyed and thinks he's just messing with him. The kid asks the seller if he's ever thought about using those jewels for industrial work, like making super sharp cutters or high-tech lenses. The guy was totally shocked and asked the kid what he was even talking about. He shouted that selling that diamond would let him live like a king for 10 whole years. Razel's jaw. The guy figured the jewelers wouldn't be an issue, so he sent the kid on his way. He even asked which crazy country treats diamonds like they're total trash. Razel sighed and asked for the price, but the guy told him even the cheapest room is a crazy 10,000 shares a night. The guy sighed and said he got it, but when Razel offered $70,000 for the diamond, the seller, who was super desperate for cash, was so shocked he actually shouted the price out loud. The guy starts screaming, asking what's in the bag and if it's some kind of charity, but Razel says no way. He just doesn't want people calling him a scammer if fake diamonds ever become a thing. The seller completely freaked out and shut him down, terrified that everyone would think he was running a scam. Razel gave the guy a silent look and pitched a new deal, explaining that since the man wants the diamond and the kid is broke, a $70,000 deposit would work, and the guy totally agreed, feeling bad for the kid's situation. Razel reached out to seal the deal, and the guy shook his hand to show they were finally on the same page. The kid started to leave the workshop, but the guy called him back, making Razel think he was finally getting his cash after waiting so long. Razel realized that alchemy in this world is basically non-existent. He also saw that the money system here is totally different. It looks like he's in for a really rough time. Maria's hotel was dead silent, and the girl at the front desk told the guy he'd have to hit the road without grabbing a single bite to eat. Razel let out a huge sigh and said he was totally exhausted, rubbing his head as he realized he was stuck in a whole new world. He snapped his eyes open and realized he had to get his head straight before doing anything else. This kid didn't believe for a second that the goddess was actually from another world. She used a massive summoning spell, but he just thought he was being moved around for a bit. On top of, he suddenly bolted upright in bed, totally stunned. He couldn't believe this was actually happening. Then it hit him. He was in a parallel world. He swiped his hand to start the space scan, and he was totally blown away by what he saw. Razel was totally confused because the laws of physics were completely broken, and there was all this weird, unknown stuff floating around everywhere. He crashed onto his bed, feeling like everything was way too real to be a dream, and Razel realized this wasn't just some game the goddess was playing, since even she seemed totally shocked when he decides right then and there that his new mission is to save the whole world, even though he's not totally sure if taking down the Demon King is what the goddess actually wants. Then he started wondering what this Demon King was actually all about. Razel pictures the Demon King as a selfish, magic-obsessed psycho who just wants to torch everything. But he's skeptical if anyone can actually be that strong, since monsters like that didn't exist where he came from. He looked around and realized this place was totally different. The demons here are actually smart, plus they all follow one single boss. Thinking about all this, a wild idea popped into his head. Razel suddenly wondered if these guys were actually cool, because after getting kicked out, he was totally lost and never expected anyone to have his back. He jumped out of bed and told everyone he finally knew exactly what his next move was. He stepped up and told everyone he was going to face the Demon King all by himself. Razel wondered if his old world magic would even work here, so he tried out a detection spell, and he was totally hyped when a little window popped up right in front of him. A spy satellite with a built-in printer suddenly pops up right in front of him. It's the perfect tool for mapping out exactly how big a territory is. He chucked a small gadget out the window, saying it'd be totally fine, and then told his buddy to find a path straight to the Demon King. Razel flopped onto the bed and shut his eyes, saying he'd grab a quick nap while the route was being mapped out. Morning hit way too fast, and Razel was wide awake the second the sun started to rise. He was shocked he actually slept through the night, but when he saw the map was already finished, he hyped himself up because everything was going perfectly. He used magic to snap the map shut and fire off a search spell, but he instantly froze when he realized someone else was hiding in the room. He used a powerful detection spell and realized someone was actually hiding in his room, spying on him from the shadows. He scoped things out and saw there were only 5 of them, so Razel used his magic right away to listen in on their conversation. One guy asked if Razel was really at the hotel, and when the other confirmed it, Rizel realized the king had sent these guys himself. As the guy stepped out into the street, the mercenaries scrambled to hide behind the roof because they realized he was the exact same hero they summoned and then kicked out of the palace. Rizel rounds the corner and sees the king is totally beefing with this guy, while the mercenaries check if everyone is in position. They went over the plan one more time. Take the target out and bring back his head to prove the job was done. Rizel scanned the area, wondering if he could use the fact that Green was aiming right at him to his advantage. Seeing the coast was clear, the mercs kicked off the mission, and one guy reached into his pocket the second he got the signal. The guy pulls out a dart and aims it right at Rizel's neck, but Rizel instantly knows it's a sleep poison that'll knock him out fast, so he faked passing out and hit the dirt, making the mercs crowd around him thinking the job was done, and all that was left was to wipe the evidence. One of the mercs shoved a sword against Rizel's neck and snatched him up. But Rizel just looked at him and brought up a quick meet. The kid suddenly leaped to his feet and totally shocked the mercenaries as he started sparking with insane lightning magic that left everyone speechless. Everyone hit the deck in total shock from the attack, so Rizel filled the room with fog and told the mercenaries it was time for a nap. He reached out the window to get a better look at what was going on. He was pretty sure he already had one of these in his inventory. Rizel pulled out that super useful multi-purpose stem. This is the special DNA core that every single clone is built from. You need this stuff to create them and even to train their skills. But it couldn't keep pumping out super strong fighters forever. Rizel figured the monster could only copy his face and not his powers, since it was just using a trick to change its cells. Suddenly, a body appeared right in front of him, and as Rizel started adding bullet wounds and clothes, the guy realized he was probably going to die. Once he finished, the kid figured his magic had fixed the place up enough and decided to let everyone else handle the rest. Rizel let out a big stretch and said a new challenge just dropped. Then he got serious and told them they're heading straight into the demon realm. As the sun went down and the city got dark, the guy on the floor finally started groaning and moving around. The hired fighters finally started waking up. They were totally lost and had no clue what just went down. One guy thought they just passed out for a second. Another wasn't so sure, thinking Rizel's body was just lying there on the floor, and after one look, they knew the kid was dead. The mercenary screams that they're just wasting time and starts yelling at the kid, but then he suddenly swings his blade and slashes him. The mercenary turned to his crew and ordered them to grab the head, and they all agreed it was finally time to head out. The group ditched the scene, leaving Rizel's body lying right in the middle of a small street. As the night got darker and a huge moon rose over the creepy castle, Rizel looked up and realized it was probably the demon's fortress. Two guards were just standing by the massive gate when someone suddenly started walking right at them, making them freak out and scream for the stranger to stop. The knights suddenly cut Rizel off with their spears, shouting for him to halt and calling him a man, which actually caught him off guard as they demanded to know what he was doing there. Rizel told the knights he wanted to talk to the Demon King and asked them to take him there, but they just looked at each other like he was totally crazy. They leveled their spears at him again, yelling at Rizel to stop messing around, and the knight asked if he seriously thought anyone could just walk up and chat with the Demon King. Rizel threw his hands up and gave a super awkward apology for crashing the place, promising to call ahead for a real meeting next time, which left everyone there totally stunned by his weirdly polite behavior. They started screaming that nobody gets a meeting with the Demon King for business, but then the knight pointed at the kid's clothes and yelled that he's actually a legendary hero. Rizel shoved the spear away and admitted he really was a hero, but the king had kicked him out of the kingdom, leaving the knight totally shocked. The guy was super hyped while telling everyone how the king's thugs almost ended him this morning, and the knight was totally shocked when he heard about the ambush. Rizel starts getting all deep about what it really means to be human, but then he admits that after all the crap he's been through, joining the Demon King actually makes sense to him. The knight pointed his weapon at the kid again, making the boy let out a nervous sigh. He shouted that history was repeating itself all over again. He remembered how some old hero said your enemy dio. Rizel knew they were in big trouble and remembered seeing this exact trick before, figuring zombie magic was their only move left. So he pointed his finger and told them he was changing his question. He pointed right at the top of the tower and asked if they even had a pathetic fence up there, making the knights freeze in total shock. One guy is totally confused about what just happened, while the other is getting heated and asking if he really just got called pathetic. The knight went totally ballistic and started screaming when the boy dared to trash-talk the Demon Lord's perfect barrier, while the second knight was freaking out and tried to quiet her down before they got in. Rizel flashed a satisfied smile and thanked the knights as it finally hit him. He was really there. He remembered that dark side and totally freaked out, wondering what he even said back then. He pulled himself together fast and acted like it was no big deal. Then the guy in the shadows, Razel gave the knight a wink and flicked his finger, having no clue he'd need his most insane teleportation magic for this barrier until a magic seal suddenly sparked to life under. The kid stared at the knights and told them they'd definitely meet again. Right as he said it, his body started vanishing into thin air. The knights were completely shocked, unable to believe he was. Razel's body starts fading away until he's totally gone, leaving Knight completely clueless about what just happened, while everyone else stares in shock as the kid literally vanishes into thin air, right? The rice shattered into tiny bits, zoomed straight toward the massive tower, and instantly put itself back together. The kid kept pushing forward, realizing he was definitely in the Demon King's room, but right as he was about to make his move, a voice suddenly stopped him in his tracks. The stunt woman stood up from her throne in total shock, pointed right at the guy inside, and asked who the heck he even was. Razel took one look at her and realized she was way more skilled than the guys at the gate, like she'd already survived some serious real-life battles. The girl freaked out and screamed, asking how a guy just appeared out of nowhere, and when she couldn't believe her barrier actually failed, Razel told her that if she was the bee, he tells her he's going to call her the Princess of Darkness, and she's so shocked she literally asks him to repeat himself. She gave a smug grin and claimed she was the real-deal Princess of Darkness, demanding to know who he was and what he was doing there. Razel just apologized for walking right through her barrier. Razel said he'd feel bad ruining her hard work, so since the barrier was still fine, he asked the princess to just let it go. But she was totally weirded out that he even managed to get through it in the first place. The Princess of Darkness jumped up in total shock, wondering who this random kid even was. She hated that she couldn't figure out what he was actually planning. Right then, the boy just placed his wall. Razel introduces himself to the princess and drops a bombshell. He was actually summoned to this world as a hero. He explains that he got kicked out and is now a free agent who doesn't. The guy stared down the dark princess and told her he was only asking one more time, but suddenly, a surge of dark energy wrapped around her and her face went completely cold. A magic seal glows under the princess as she explains the hero's real motives, but then she totally snaps and starts screaming at him to stop messing around. Razel looked down at the seal under his feet and realized he'd totally messed up his big entrance to meet the princess. The guy raises his hand and a tiny seal pops up, making the wall nearby totally explode. The girl dives right at him, screaming that he's a total jerk. Razel stayed totally chill while defending himself, knowing they had zero proof he was alone or that he wasn't actually a hero. Standing in the middle of all that wreckage and dust, the Princess of Darkness just smirked and said the kid was actually pretty smart. He just stood there staring at her, trying to figure out what his next move should be. Suddenly, Razel heard a noise as two demons smashed into the room, and the girl frantically asked the queen if she was okay. The demons spotted the stranger and stopped dead in their tracks. Then one of them stared Razel down and demanded to know who he was. The Princess of Darkness screams for her people to watch out because her powers aren't doing a single thing to him. Razel figured they were only at 80% of that girl's power, so the guy yelled to the princess that their attacks weren't doing a thing. But the demon. Razel looked around and figured he didn't need to prove he was safe, especially since taking these two out would be a great way to get back at the Princess of Darkness. Razel looked up, knowing he looked like a total threat, and when he waved his hand, the demons actually flinched in fear. The guy waves his hand and summons a massive seal, determined to show everyone that just talking it out is the best way to handle things. Right then, both demons were totally shocked, and the Dark Princess was so freaked out she almost started crying as she screamed for Jack and Zarina. Zarina let out a sigh, but she was totally shocked when a line of blood suddenly appeared on her neck while Razel was busy messing with the seal. Suddenly, a wave of energy wrapped around the Princess of Darkness's servants, instantly healing their wounded necks. Zarina was totally lost and had no clue what just happened, but Jack rubbed his neck and swore his head had literally just been sliced off. The Princess of Darkness was tearing up as she asked if they'd really been reborn. Razel told her he never actually meant to kill them, and then she started rambling all confused about her servants' necks. Razel just sighed and told them they were being way too dramatic, leaving the demons totally frozen in shock as he mocked them for thinking they'd actually die just because their heads were flying through. The Dark Princess pointed right at him and yelled that he's a total freak because no magic in the world lets you live after getting your head chopped off. Razel almost asked if they were getting rusty at magic because of all the boring politics, but he kept quiet since nobody talks back to the Princess of Darkness, which made Zarina snap at him to show some respect because the queen rules the demons for one reason. She's the strongest one there is. Right then, the Lord himself stepped in, and she shut her eyes while telling Zarina to knock it off. Razel stayed quiet while the princess blabbed about the boy being a total outsider they couldn't understand. But once Razel told her to knock it off, Zarina shut up and Jack. The Princess of Darkness walked right up to Razel and asked if she heard right, that he really came all this way just to learn about this world. The Dark Princess gave him a nervous smile and told him he could ask her anything, and Razel was just hyped that she was finally opening up. Zarina jumped in all nervous, warning them that this kid could still be a secret enemy. But the princess just smiled and said they'd find out the truth soon enough, so Zarina decided it. The servants were super worried about the girl, but the princess told her to stop getting beat up and start focusing on how to actually find a way toward hope. She realized she was actually the one who started the fight, and she's pretty sure that if they just talk things through, this guy could totally become their ally. The Dark Princess just smirked and told the servants to wait outside because everything was under control, and Razel finally breathed a sigh of relief, thinking the hard part was finally over. Once Princess Zarina finished talking, the two Jacks shared a look and nodded. They bowed low and promised to do exactly what she wanted, because her word was basically law to them. The room went totally silent as the demon princess kicked back on her throne and crossed her legs. She flashed Razel a big grin and told him he could ask her literally anything, so he just smiled back and thanked her for the chance. He dropped to his knees and asked if the rumors about demons getting stronger and taking over the world were true. But the demon princess just calmly told him that wasn't happening. Razel stared at her in total shock and asked what was so bad about what he said, but she just let out a huge sigh and told him that literally every single word was wrong. First off, demons haven't actually gotten any stronger over the years. It's the opposite. They're getting way weaker every single year, and they never even thought about trying. The demon princess whipped out a stack of papers tied with string and tossed them at Razel, telling him to read up. And though he was totally caught off guard, he managed to grab them. The princess reveals these papers are a contract between humans and demons, and Razel can tell they're pulsing with royal magic. She casually tells him he's holding the actual original documents, leaving Razel totally shook as he asks if she's for real, and the princess just calmly confirms it's the truth. The kid flipped open the paper and his face went dead serious as he started reading. So basically, if you mess up at the demon border, you're judged by human laws, and if a demon gets wrecked in our world, nobody even gets in trouble. Razel freaked out and asked how she could ever sign such a crazy deal, so the girl sadly explained that a hero took down the Demon King way back in the day. She said the strongest demon always gets to be the boss, but once the Demon King died, it was clear that nobody could actually beat the hero anymore. The princess said she was totally backed into a corner because if they didn't follow the rules, the hero was going to snatch her throne and take out that girl. Razel told the girl he totally got her logic. Then he went quiet and just stared her down until he noticed her hands were shaking like crazy, making him stop and really think. Razel couldn't figure out why he was even summoned since a super strong hero already existed, and while he guessed a new one gets called whenever the old one dies, the whole thing felt totally suspicious. The boy looked at the demon princess and asked if he could ask her something, so she sat up straight and asked what he wanted to know. Razel shot a quick look at the princess and asked if the hero was still alive, which totally caught her off guard. She took a deep breath and told him he was still alive, admitting she would have trashed that contract forever ago if it wasn't for this hero. So Razel handed it over and asked why he was even summoned. She was totally shocked and asked if he really got kicked out of school, but he just looked her in the eye and said it was true, acting like it wasn't even a big deal. The princess just smirked and told Razel he was lucky to be alive, leaving him totally shocked and asking what she even meant by that. The girl told him he was only brought to this world to be a sacrifice, and the guy's face went totally white. Moonlight hit the Demon King's castle, and it was dead silent. Then out of nowhere, everything just froze for one person. She coldly tells him that people like him are just called victims. The guy is totally stunned and asks her what that's even supposed to mean. He begs her to keep going and give him more. The demon princess looked down and started her story, explaining that everything kicked off 600 years ago when the hero first showed up. She says he was actually pretty weak back then, and he definitely wasn't on the same level as the four heavenly kings Jack or Zarina's parents. Razel was pretty stunned to find out the strongest fighters were actually the parents of the two kids he just flexed on. She told them that all the heroes were finally on the same level, and the elites were so blown away they gave a special name to the goddess who created these absolute beasts. Razel sighed, realizing all this drama led straight to the next disaster. And while he thought it was a total drag, the demon princess was shocked he'd actually figured it all out. Razel stopped to think and realized that someone from this world probably did make this magic item, which actually made a lot more sense than his other theories. He asked her if the goddess was the one who made these magic items, and the princess just sighed, totally disappointed that the answer was so obvious. Razel realizes the first hero was actually way stronger than the original Demon King. And hearing that makes the princess snarl in pure rage. They teamed up with the first hero to wreck the demons and started summoning a whole squad of new heroes to help. But as soon as any of them hit their limit, they let the first hero. The girl said this whole cycle is just going to keep repeating, and that the first hero is now way stronger than he's ever been. She passed on the king's message. They had zero clue the demon lord would actually show up, so they built the ultimate hero for Razel's side. And honestly, it totally makes sense when you think about it. The demon princess took a breath, looked up, and got comfy on her throne as she told them that was literally all she knew. Razel finally put the pieces together and realized that if this was true, the goddess and the hero were actually his enemies, which was crazy since he only came here to get her help. He saw right through her and realized she was totally fine with throwing her assistant under the bus, so he knew that plan was a total no-go. The guy stood up and asked the princess if he could double-check her story. And even though she was caught off guard, she quickly played it cool and said she was totally fine with it. Razel raises his hand, and a sleek info screen pops up as he starts planning to use satellites to find some proof. She watched this weird energy closely, thinking it looked like some kind of tracking magic, but she had no clue what he was actually trying to do with her. Right then, marked paths popped up on the Razel screen, and the boy noticed their souls didn't even look human anymore. He whispered that he found signs of a magic relic and the first hero right there in the palace, proving the demon princess was telling the truth all along. The girl was totally shocked and asked how he managed to dig up all the palace secrets because it was honestly mind-blowing. Razel just turned around and told them that figuring this stuff out is super easy if you have everything you need. The princess leaned back on her throne and said it was awesome, casually mentioning she'd love to have something just like it, and she was totally blown away that absolutely nothing could stand in Razel. She pouted and said she felt totally useless from the start, asking if she was even needed at all. Razel kept it cool and said she was right, admitting he never would have guessed the first hero was still hiding in the palace without her. He looked away, admitting he never thought he'd end up as a victim, while Razel just smiled and thanked the princess for the story. She looked away instantly with a bright red face, acting like the whole thing was no big deal at all. Razel realized that if he could just find the goddess and force her to send him back home, it would be the perfect way to make that total jerk panic. He thinks about using the first hero as a hostage, but then he realizes it won't actually help the Dark Princess, so he lets out a massive sigh and shouts that he finally gets it. Razel suddenly whipped around to face the princess, and while she was busy yelling at him for being so weird, he just smirked and asked if she wanted to be the one to take down the first. She completely froze right then and there. The princess realized this guy made the same shady deal that wiped out her entire family. She told him she'd been dreaming about getting payback her whole life. The princess looked him dead in the eye and said she was totally down, so Razel flashed a smile and told her it was a done deal. The guy asked her what she thought about his big plan. He promised he'd be the one to personally train her. This totally caught the princess off guard and left her super confused. She pouted her lips and awkwardly asked him why he was going to such crazy lengths. Razel closes his eyes and tells the girl he just wants to get back to his own world, but he's got to make some big choices to make that happen. The Princess of Darkness stared at him in total shock and admitted he was right. She realized that he actually had a secret goal of his own. She shyly asked why he believed she could ever be. Razel told the girl they're only at a fifth of his power and insisted that anyone could get that strong with just a tiny bit of effort. The girl looked at him like he was crazy and said taking down even a fifth of them was way too hard. So Razel stood up and asked if she was actually the strongest one in her whole light. The boy promised her that if she just studies, everything will work out. And Razel added with a smirk that life gets way easier once she figures out her own weaknesses, leaving the princess to just me. The girl stands up, walks right over to him and says that if he's really that serious, she's totally down since she already made up her mind. Razel smirked, realizing the princess actually knew exactly what she was doing. The Dark Princess and the hero finally shook hands, and she told him she was actually hyped to work together. But as soon as he told her to get ready to teleport, she got super at ease. The girl freaked out and clutched her face, but Razel helped her get it together by asking if she knew a spot where they could practice. Razel wants to see what the girl is really made of, so the princess thinks for a second and tells him there's an open square just a few miles away. He spread the map out, she pointed to a spot saying it was right there, and Razel just hoped they'd actually find a way inside. Razel grabbed the princess and told her to hang on tight, and even though she was super nervous about flying that far, he just flashed a confident smile and told her they were definitely going for it. A massive magic circle suddenly glows right under the princess and the hero. She starts freaking out, yelling that she isn't ready for this at all. Their bodies quickly turn into glowing dust and fly. They finally made it to the spot, and it was totally empty with nobody else around. The Dark Princess was barely hanging on, hunching over and gasping for air with her head down. The girl was totally wiped out and felt like she was trapped in a living nightmare, but she was still blown away by how that magic teleported them so far in an instant, while The princess slumped down and sighed that everything was fine. Then she looked at the boy and asked what that weird thing even was. Razel told the princess it was all for a magic barrier to create a mirage, but she was totally lost. He just grinned and said that from the outside it looked like He gave her a smirk and promised that even if she was super embarrassed, nobody would see a thing, so she could just relax. But the princess just thanked him while secretly thinking he was making the whole thing up. Razel told her she was already set for war, and even though the princess was caught off guard, she turned around and confidently told him she was ready to go. The Dark Princess looked right at the chill boy and told him they were finally going to fight with everything they had. Razel flashes a smirk and says it's finally time to throw down, while the girl stares him down, looking totally ready to take on the hero. She braced herself and tried to predict his next move, first thinking about blocking him head-on, but then deciding it was way smarter to just dodge. Right then, the guy standing right in front of the princess just vanished into thin air, leaving her looking around in total shock as she yelled, "Where did he go?" The Princess of Darkness stopped dead in her tracks when she felt magic buzzing all around her, realizing it was the same spell that had just cleared the area. She knew swinging blindly was a total waste of time, so she focused up and tracked down exactly where that power was coming from. Right then, her eyes snapped open and she clicked her teeth with a look of total annoyance because she finally spotted something. She whipped around and fired off a spell, yelling that he was finally there. But then a tiny rock smacked the princess right on the head, leaving her totally confused as she stared at it on the P. She takes a good look and realizes it's just a normal ball, but her head is seriously stinging when she touches it. Suddenly, Razel pops up right behind her and warns her the ball is... The princess spun around in total shock, thinking he was using real telepathy, but Razor just grinned and told her he was only cranking up the volume of his voice, which totally blew her mind. She balled up her fist, totally fuming, but Razel just smirked and said he was hyped to see what she'd do next. He kept egging her on because The Princess of Darkness was totally fuming, showing her teeth and swearing she'd dodge the next hit. Razel just smirked and zipped right past her like a bolt of lightning. Suddenly, they've been training for ages, and as the sun finally starts to set, the princess pulls off a perfect move and smacks that ball right back. She was totally wiped out and covered in sweat. She couldn't believe she actually managed to hold her ground. Right then, the boy started hyping up the princess. Razel told Det. The Princess of Darkness stared the kid down, knowing it was finally time to strike. She tried to follow his every move, but her eyes still hadn't adjusted to the pitch-black room. She took a deep breath to chill out, realizing she needed a whole new plan. But right then, Razel spotted something. The Dark Princess threw her arms out and shut her eyes as a ton of glowing magic seals suddenly surrounded her. Razel saw those fire arrows coming, muttered a curse, and quickly threw up another shield while turning away in total frustration. The Princess of Darkness put all her power into a sudden leap to the side, screaming as she went in for the hit. The girl was totally out of breath, but she still had a massive grin on her face. She looked right at the boy and asked him how he was feeling. Razel was super confused while the girl was gasping for air, but the princess just flashed a huge grin and cheered that she finally pulled it off. Right after that, the girl just flops onto the ground and starts whining about being totally exhausted while the barrier keeps falling apart, making Razel wonder if she thinks he's too weak to even defend himself. It's going to take some serious effort to pull off that ancient magic barrier, but he refuses to look like a rookie, so he's pushing himself to the limit to prove he's a total master. As she's gasping for air, the boy walks over and reaches out his hand, leaving the Princess of Darkness totally stunned. She took his help with a grin and asked if they were ready to start, while Razel wondered what this Princess of Darkness could actually do. So he just smiled back and said Razel was ready to move the barrier, but the princess cut him off in a total panic, yelling that she needed to rest again. They took a quick breather, and then she turned to him, asking which obstacle he was even talking about. Razel says he's going to make a little dome, and the girl's job is to blast it apart with her magic. The girl glared at him and asked about the dome, wondering if he really thought she couldn't handle it. So Razel popped a shield and told her she'd have to prove it. Raze was suddenly covered by a massive energy dome, and he just grinned at the girl, telling her that no magic in the world could break through this shield. The Princess of Darkness flashed a massive smirk, thinking this guy was getting way too cocky, and just told him she'd keep his words in mind. She slammed down a massive seal and warned the guy that he had no idea how strong she actually was. Right then, the Princess of Darkness fired a massive blast at the boy, but he was totally safe behind his barrier. Her attack slams into the barrier but doesn't even scratch him, leaving her totally shocked that it can actually block magic. She just stood there in total silence, watching him not even flinch after her big hit. Roselle drops his guard and asks if she thought he was playing around, but she just glares at him, wondering why he's acting so tough when she only missed her first shot. The Princess of Darkness looked totally heartbroken as she turned away from the guy, even though he was begging her not to be mad. He was completely confused and had no clue why she was acting so weird. Roselle was totally tripping and hesitated, but he finally apologized and admitted he didn't even know her name yet, making the Princess of Darkness super annoyed that he was just now figuring that out. She admitted she messed up too, introduced herself as Mercia, the Princess of Darkness, and thanked him for stepping up to help. Roselle awkwardly thanked her for trusting him, then told her that if they're serious, it's time to start using their most powerful skills. He tells her she's got tons of raw power, but her skills are so bad that her attacks are basically useless, leaving her totally confused and asking him to explain it in plain English. And Roselle explained that her magic is basically like a water pump, where the hose is her raw power and the pressure is her skill, showing her exactly why she can't attack until she finally understood the kid uses a human and a dragon as an example. Obviously, their power levels are worlds apart, so you'd think the monster would win in a heartbeat. But if that human levels up there, Roselle tells her she just needs to practice controlling her magic and picking her targets, promising to train her until she can crush even the strongest demons, so she says she's totally ready. The boy tells Mercia they're starting with a 3D magic dome, and the princess is so hyped she repeats it right back to him. Roselle realizes he's got a massive job ahead of him, especially since he can tell she's still totally clueless about something important. He explained that magic shields come in all sorts of shapes, but while a flat one is super weak, Roselle promised to teach her how to build a 3D dome that's basically unbreakable because the princess was totally stunned because she couldn't believe this was actual science. So she asked if her powers could just keep leveling up forever, and Roselle just gave her a big smile and told her, "Yep, exactly." Mercia was totally shocked she built that dome so fast and wondered if this guy had some kind of secret shortcut for their training. Roselle tells her he wasn't born a master and had to grind for years to get this strong, but Mercia just gets annoyed and calls him a total bore because she doesn't want to wait that long. She tells him she's got a question and asks why he even bothered to train her, but Mercia explains he's actually got a totally different goal. So the girl asks why he doesn't. He admitted she was totally right and said he had two big reasons: getting some solid intel and making her think he's actually thankful for her help. But then he threw in one more detail. Roselle told the girl he wanted her to become an adventurer and travel back to his world with him after they won, and the Princess of Darkness was totally blown away by that. The boy tells her she's got time to think his proposal over, but Mercia is totally lost and shouts out to ask what he even means. Roselle explains there's a monster in his world that's way too strong for him to beat alone, so he wants to team up to finally take it down. It's a simple deal. It seemed totally impossible, but after seeing how she refused to quit, Roselle looked at her and said they actually had a real shot at winning. He tells her this move takes serious training to master. He warns her not to waste her time even trying. Mercier actually agrees with him. She tells him to step up and show her how it's. Mercy swore she'd become the greatest sorceress ever with him watching her every move, promising to master that 3D dome spell and unlock infinite power so they could crush their enemies, get stronger together, and finally find out the real truth. Roselle really liked her vibe and told her she was cool, but then she caught him off guard by asking one more thing, revealing she has a younger sister who's just as powerful as she is. But she just got hit with a weird sickness and is totally out of commission. If Mercia has to ditch her kingdom to follow her boyfriend to another world, she wants her sister to step up and be. The girl thought maybe Roselle's world had some crazy medicine to cure her sister and get her back to full strength. And even though Roselle didn't know the first thing about being a doctor, he started obsessing over this super weird disease. He promised Mercy he'd do whatever it takes to find her a cure. And the princess was so hyped, she kept thanking him for actually stepping up to help. She started heading out and asked why he was even out of bed, telling him they had to rush back to the castle so she could spill everything to her sister. Roselle agreed, but told her, by that time it was already pitch black outside and a massive moon was hanging over the horizon. She was just chilling on the couch with her book when a portal suddenly ripped open right in front of her, totally catching her off guard. She's totally freaked out because the air around her is warping and she's sure someone is about to jump her. But then Mercia and Roselle suddenly show up, with the guy apologizing for being late while she calls out to her little sister in total relief. Mercia plopped down and apologized for the scare, but the younger sister told her not to sweat it since she just didn't recognize the magic. When the girl asked who the mysterious guy, the Princess of Darkness reveals that this guy is Razel, a legendary warrior from another world who crushed her magic and barrier with ease, and since even his spells can catch her off guard, he's clearly a special kind of mage and fighter. Razel asked if she was just being extra, so Mercia awkwardly admitted she might be, but then she looked at him and sighed, realizing he really was on a whole different level. Mercia grabbed her sister's hands and explained she brought the boy there to heal her, leaving the girl totally stunned by the real reason he showed up. Re's still gonna keep fighting with a smile. Rewriting sentence 4. She just told the girl to give him a shot at healing her. Combining into one line, the princess's little sister nervously said that if she trusts the guy, then she's totally cool with it. Razel smiled at the sisters, thinking about how they totally had each other's backs, until Mercia called him over and he shouted back that he was on his way. The guy sat right in front of her and gave her a friendly greeting. He told her he was honestly just stoked to finally meet her. He promised she had nothing to worry about because Razel says he gets it, and while Mercia is super annoyed by how smart he is, she asks what's actually wrong with her sister and if magic is the cause. Razel explains that her tiny body is basically overflowing with too much magic, making her health and powers a total mess. And while the boy hangs on every word, she asks if she's actually got a serious illness. The boy tells her not to freak out because he's got a special antidote that'll fix her energy flow and get her back to normal. This stuff was made to balance her power. He told her straight up that once that pill hits her system, the effects are going to last forever. Mercia was totally blown away by that and had to ask if he was actually for. She looked at the girl with total respect and called out to her, so Mercy just smiled back and promised everything was okay since they both trusted that guy. The princess's little sister gave a quick nod, popped the medicine in her mouth, and gulped it right down. The girl let out a calm breath and Mercia immediately asked if the medicine worked, but the princess's sister said she didn't feel any different at all. Mercy starts screaming her head off at the guy, demanding to know why the pill isn't working and if it's expired, while he just covers his ears and tells her it takes a few days to kick in. He reminded them that the medicine takes a few days to kick in, so they'd just have to wait. And while the girl awkwardly said she was fine, Razel touched the gem on her. The princess's sister stared at her hands in shock and asked what was happening, realizing her power finally felt way more chill. So Mercia cheered that it was awesome and her sister totally. Mercia pulled her little sister into a tearful hug and promised she was finally going to be okay, while Razel watched them with a smile, relieved they'd actually fixed everything. She kept staring down at her hands, and after a quick moment of doubt, she finally told everyone she was ready to go. Mercia was totally nervous too, but still had her sister's back. The girl poured her magic into the vase until it started splitting into different pieces. She was super hyped and yelled that it actually worked. She totally pulled it off. Mercia was blown away that her little Razel grinned and said that even the most insane spells would be a total breeze for her now. She flashed a huge grin and cheered that it was awesome because now she could finally use light magic. Mercia burst into tears, calling it a total miracle that her little sister could finally cure her, while the girl wiped the princess's face and told her to just relax because it was actually happening. Razel explained that the weird magic goo making Shill sick is unlike anything else, but using this medicine earns you gratitude from people or the magic itself, leaving Mercia staring at the boy. The boy just smiled and said he'd already eaten, then insisted they give this medicine to every soldier to seriously buff the army's power. Mercy's eyes went wide as she asked if they could actually make a ton of this medicine at once. The boy admits that when the meds first dropped, they were just handed out to kids in poor countries. The pharma company made way too much in the first batch, which is why the drug is. The princess just smiles and says that even if everything gets wrecked, they can still find a use for what's left. And Razel grins back, telling her that vibe fits her perfectly. Mercia excitedly told them to get everyone in place because she was coming. And while Razel and Shishil were left by themselves, she asked if he wanted to get closer to his sister. He took a deep breath to think, but she cut him off right away to say it was way too hard, leaving him looking up in total shock. She admitted her sister is basically the most powerful person in the country, and everyone trusts her, which is exactly why she can't beat Mercia. And even though Razel tried to speak up, she told him that's just the way it is. He's caught totally off guard as she flashes a huge grin, promising that if he needs a sister and Mercia is down, she'll do whatever it takes to make it happen. She grinned and promised she'd do literally anything for her sister. So Razel looked her in the eyes and told her he was totally counting on her. Then he turns to Shishil and asks if she knows anything about politics, which totally catches her off guard as she laughs nervously and admits she's super embarrassed to have zero experience. Razel sips his tea and tells her she's got to make the most of this opportunity. He hands over the papers and explains that learning from real pros is the only way to level up. Once they finished talking, the room got totally quiet and super awkward. The guys just looked at each other, having no idea what to say next. But then, Mercier suddenly bursts in with, Shahashia gave her sister a super nervous greeting, and the Princess of Darkness just stopped to ask if anything big went down while she was gone. Razel grabs her shoulder and sees she's already turned around, making her face go totally pale. He just chills on the couch and tells her he needs to take some of her memories, and the girl sat down to wait for Razel's next move, but then his words finally clicked, and she screamed, asking what he was planning to rip out of her memories. Razel told her she's got to stay chill and not pass out, because this simulator is recording every single move she makes. She basically said it's magic that uses her memories to make school stuff, but Mercia was like, wait, are you serious? Razel pulls out his gear and confirms everything is ready to go. The girl slides the item into her hair, admitting she thought she had things figured out until now. But honestly, she's completely... Mercia insisted everything was totally fine, and Razel just gave her a smirk, saying she'd done a great job getting ready. He touched the item and said it was finally time to start. Then a notification popped up saying he'd scored some magic memory crystals as the girl locked in. The girl realized she could literally have anything she wanted. Right then, something started messing with her head. Shishil was totally freaking out and kept looking over at her sister. Suddenly, she hears that the Earth and Demon Control Simulator is finally ready to go. So she pulls a gadget out of her hair and asks if this is it, and Razel tells her. Shishil was super confused but said she got it, so Razel told her to hit the red magic stone in the middle, and she totally lost it when her face suddenly popped up on the screen. The system is asking how they're dealing with everything, and since it brought up hunger 2 years ago, they're going with the third option on the training streak. Shishil was totally shocked and admitted she wasn't sure if things would actually get better, so she decided to fire up second mode while Mercia just watched in total silence. The system confirmed that was the right answer and got super hyped, shouting that if they just pick 2, everything is going to work out perfectly. Mercia flexed that she was the one who made everything run so well, and Shishil was super hyped, saying she expected nothing less from her sister, which made Mercia feel like a... Razel walks up and tells her this booster is the real deal, and she's super hyped that he's helping out. Then she looks straight at the princess and says she's going to test it out right now and go for round 2 later. Mercier gave the girl a head pat and told her she was counting on her, making everyone there super hyped. The next day, the squad meets up and Razel announces that phase 2 of her training starts right now so she can finally surpass that daredevil. He asks if she's ready to go, and she's totally hyped, telling him she's in peak condition and ready for his help. She told him she needed her own room to train, and he didn't even hesitate to say yes. He told her to use the device to blast out some magic this time, but while she was asking what it was, she spotted a figurine sitting on the table. Razel explains that this artifact is like a giant vacuum, sucking up almost all the magic in the area and even draining it out of living people to keep the energy levels super low and totally flat. Mercia asks if there's a catch, and he drops a bombshell. If she doesn't act, her magic will run dry and she'll die, leaving her completely freaked out. Razel just flashed a smile and told him not to sweat it since things rarely get that crazy. Then she asked what he was actually planning to do with that gadget. The kid said he wanted to trap insane magic inside his body and control it using pure human strength, which totally blew her mind. He explained that he doesn't need a fancy setup to use his power since light magic is all about your own focus. So he told her to practice by making a candle flame stretch out really long. The girl awkwardly said she understood, but you could totally tell she was super nervous. Mercia was so hyped to show off that she told the boy to watch closely, but the candle went out right away and left her standing there completely stunned. The Dark Princess finally locked in, telling herself that being a demon meant this would be easy. She hyped herself up, but even with Razel watching her every move, the candle just wouldn't. Mercy was staring down that candle, just begging it to light up, and the second a spark finally popped, she totally started cheering. But the light cut out instantly, and the girl was so annoyed she just started pouting. Mercier cried out, totally confused about what was even going on. The girl asked if she'd totally drained herself from using all that magic. She sighed, saying she just wasn't built. The girl stood up with tears in her eyes, stayed quiet for a second, and then shouted that she's not stopping until she finally wins. Razel just closed his eyes with a smirk, saying everything went exactly how he planned, while Mercia threw her hands up and yelled that she's totally down to do it. Just then, a knock hits the door, and Razel opens it to find Shishil standing there with tea. But he quickly tells her to keep it down. Shashiel peeked inside where the boy pointed and saw her sister totally in the zone with her training. Mercia suddenly clutched her head and let out a frustrated scream, while Razel and Shashiel just stood there with big smirks on their faces. The princess's little sister quickly brings the guy some tea, leaving him totally confused just as the princess herself walks into the room. Mercia was totally losing it over the fail, but then she spotted her little sister standing right there with the kindest look on her face. The sisters all headed off to do their own thing, while Razel grabbed the tray of tea the girl had left for him. Out of nowhere, the candle the princess was holding just burst into flames. Mercier was totally blown away by her, and Shishil and Raziel were just as stunned. The princess cheered that she finally pulled it off and sprinted over to give her little sister a massive hug. Raziel looked at her and realized that for once, everything actually went right. The magic didn't blow up and the fire stayed lit. So Mercy cheered that she told him she was never gonna fight. The princess flopped onto the table, totally wiped out. So Razel told her they'd make the spells harder later and that she could switch to combat magic whenever she felt like it. Pretty soon, the girl will be able to warp right into the arena using teleportation magic. Mercia says she wants to master that mind-diving magic before anything else. Shashiel is totally hyped. And a little while later, the guys headed back to the arena where she was still grinding away. Mercy pressed her hands together and started charging up a massive ball of energy that just kept getting stronger right in front of Razel. He looked at the hyper little bundle and told her it was a perfect fit. Mercia let all that built-up energy fly, and it vanished instantly, making her grin since she knew she absolutely crushed it from the way it showed up to the way it disappeared. Razel was hyped that she reached this level in under a month, so he decided to shut the machine off. But Mercier asked if a magic test was even necessary since they already hit their goal. Razel flashed the princess a grin and told her he was just thinking about that. Then he started breaking down exactly what kind of crazy training she was in for. Right then, something popped up from the ground as a huge shield wall started growing right in front of Razel. He looked right at her and told her he was about to summon some 3D magic barriers. Mercia looked at him in total shock, reminding him again that these obstacles were actually 3D magic barriers. Razel tells the princess their base is right on the surface and uses multi-layered tech, which she realizes is just stacking flat magic barriers to build a super strong 3D shield. The kid explains that 3D magic barriers are supposed to pop up instantly, because if you build them piece by piece, even a tiny breeze will make them fall apart. He looked her right in the eye and asked if she could handle it, but Mercia just flashed a confident grin that told him she was totally ready. Mercia kept telling herself she'd win if she just tried hard enough, so she locked in and started building a massive barrier. Tiny pieces stacked up fast into a massive wall, and Razel was blown away by how super focused and perfect she was while building. Mercier blurted out her first words with a massive smile, and when Razel told her she was doing awesome for a rookie, she just grinned and reminded him she's the Princess of Darkness for a reason. Right then, the boy turns to the princess and asks to test her barrier's strength, which completely catches her off guard. Suddenly, a massive explosion rips through the wall right next to her, making her scream. And when the smoke finally clears, Mercier is totally shocked that he actually saved her. Mercia touched the barrier and saw there wasn't even a single scratch on it. So Razel explained that these layered shields are way stronger than normal ones before asking her if she could. The princess is totally vibing with how gorgeous the barrier looks. She feels like she's the one who actually cast this insane protection. Raiz tells her they're aiming for full 3. Mercia flashed a huge smile, saying it was awesome and that they should totally go for it. She shouted for Razel to come check out the insane magic wall she just built. Razel was super impressed and told her that barrier could tank any hit. Mercia collapsed onto the ground, totally hyped that. Mercia collapsed on the floor, totally wiped out, and admitted that was way harder than she expected, but Razel reached out to help her up and told her she did an awesome job. He looked her in the eyes and promised that starting tomorrow, they were going to go all in on those 3D magic cubes and master magic together. But for now, he told the princess she shot him down and said she didn't need a break because there was zero time to chill, insisting she had to master the magic basics ASAP. And Raisel just nodded, saying that kind of drive is totally normal for girls. Razel flashed a smirk and warned Mercy that he was going to be super strict from now on. The princess shouted back that she totally got it. She told him to quit stalling and just get a move on. An hour goes by since Razel first met the girl, And when he asks if this is the secret training spot Mercy mentioned, she just smiles and tells him he's in the right place. The Princess of Darkness smirked as she looked ahead, explaining that this warehouse sat right next to the Demon Kingdom and some massive farms, and she couldn't get over how awesome the view was. Keeping these massive farms running for the kingdom is a total nightmare. It basically never rains here, so it's a huge struggle to stop the crops from dying. High-ranking demons only drop some. Razel was blown away by how much it rained in this place, and it finally clicked why she chose this spot to train. The smiling boy closed his eyes and told her he knew this wasn't the only reason she brought him here, asking if she had anything else she wanted to say. Mercia decides to water the fields using a wild multi-layered magic barrier to make it rain. And while the guy is totally stunned and asks if she came up with this genius trick herself, Razel finally realized why she needed his help, and Mercy admitted she was just terrified that instead of making it rain, she'd accidentally blow the whole kingdom sky high. Mercy was totally lost. But Razel figured she'd been grinding for ages to master that magic barrier, and he actually respected her for wanting to protect her kingdom. Razel told her to nail the basic shield first before trying to stop the rain, and Mercia was super down for the plan. The princess starts casting a shield, but Razel takes a look and says this formula will actually make it rain if they can just boost the growth and keep the nutrients steady. He told Mercy to start with a basic circle before slowly adding his formula, promising to stop the training if things got sketchy, and she was totally down for it. Mercia finally cooled off and realized she seriously needed to lock in. Glowing rings of energy suddenly popped up around the girl, and as Razel watched her closely, he was totally sure she'd pull off a barrier and keep the magic under control. Razel was seriously blown away by how insane making magic circles was, and it honestly kind of scared him. So he told the girl that everything turned out perfect and suggested they finally try firing it up. The Princess of Darkness starts flexing her real strength, and her zone of power gets bigger and bigger until it's totally massive. Just then, rain started falling from the sky, and it totally caught everyone's attention. Everyone started cheering about how awesome life is under the Princess of Darkness. They noticed the magic circle was way bigger than usual this year. They all screamed their thanks to her. She just gave them E. Right then, she realized something was off. So Mercia whipped around and asked the boy what just happened. Razel flashed a smile and said everything was looking great. The guy mentioned that this year's crops were going to be huge. Suddenly, the girl collapsed right there on the floor. The Princess of Darkness had tears welling up in her eyes, but she just kept saying everything was totally fine. Razel was sure that no matter how insane the training got, she never once let herself cry. Mercy starts talking about how they won't have to rely on anyone anymore, admitting she felt super embarrassed to cry in front of her husband, which totally catches him by surprise. Razel was totally shocked and asked if they really stole the work. And even with food right there, he wanted to know when the deliveries would finally end. But Mercia just said Razel was just glad he wasn't late because things would have been a total disaster, so he told her he got the point. And she said that this year, the Lord was final. Mercia looked up and promised that no one would starve anymore. And as she stared at the sky, the boy added that this year's harvest was going to be insane. The princess smirked and said she couldn't wait to see the looks on those slave traders' faces. And even though Raisel was a bit shocked, he totally agreed. A ton of time passes, and back in the capital, the lilies are just minding their own business when someone looks at a paper in surprise and lets out a frustrated sigh. The king is absolutely losing his mind, screaming about how pathetic their sales are now that crop exports have tanked by 95%, and when the other guy nervously asks what's up, the king just chucks a paper at his feet and yells that it's total garbage. The king started losing it, screaming to know what was going on while the other guy just stood there looking totally terrified and confused. He noticed fewer traders around, so he went straight to the demon diplomat and found out they have over 100% of the food they need, meaning they've totally stopped importing humans. The king let out a massive annoyed sigh, and the workers started panicking that things were about to go south, especially since he remembered the last guy who got executed just for being rude. The king ranted about how these demons think they're so high and mighty, then turned to Regis to see if the 3 summoned heroes were ready to roll. Regis told him everything was good to go, so Regis stared at the king in total shock. But the king just ordered him to take out the demon lord first, and then force the demons to keep buying all their crops like they did last year. Regis went back and told the king the heroes weren't strong enough to take down the demon lord yet, and the king just nodded happily, saying he totally understood. Suddenly, the king remembered a specific rule that says demons aren't allowed to kill the heroes they summoned. And even a shocked Regis had to admit it was the truth. The king dropped the news that the demons broke their deal and slaughtered the heroes, starting a massive war, while Regis just grumbled that he couldn't use their bodies for synthesis anymore. The guy told his servant the demons were plotting something, so he ordered a total strike and didn't care if a few heroes died, while Regis just bowed and apologized. The king just scowled and waved them off, so Regis said his sorries and the official finally let out a massive sigh of relief. He took a close look at the scroll beside him and started talking about how these demons are totally clueless. He had no clue what their strategy was, but he was definitely going to show them that attacking humanity is a huge mistake. While walking down the hall, he suddenly catches people whispering about a plan to raid the king's castle. He crept closer to the door, wondering if he was in the right place after hearing someone mention the demon lord's castle, but as he leaned in to listen, he realized he was actually terrible. He recognized the king's voice ordering his men to summon the heroes just to kill them for some creepy experiment and start a total war with the demons, making him realize these heroes were just being used as disposable pawns. He walks down the hallway and brushes off his doubts, thinking that if he actually wanted them dead, he would have taken them out a long time ago. Bonza's froze in his tracks as a terrifying thought hit him. What if the king is actually trying to kill them? He cut his train of thought right there, gave a tiny smirk, and realized he was totally overthinking. Back in the middle of the desert, the wind was howling, as Mercy complained again that there was absolutely nothing out there. The Princess of Darkness asked if he was serious about fighting right then and there, but Graciel told her they'd gotten way too powerful over the last 6 months for a normal arena to handle, and since there was nothing around to break, it was the perfect time to go all out. Razel flashed a smirk and asked if she was finally ready to go all out, and after a quick second, Mercia just nodded and said she was on it. The boy tells the princess they should fight with 0 rules, and Mercia agrees it's time to finally go all out. Suddenly, a glowing circle lit up under her feet. A massive pile of weapons popped out behind her, and she grabbed a magic spear to lunge straight at the guy. As the spears zoomed toward Razel, he realized they were enchanted and knew a basic defense wouldn't cut it, so he quickly summoned a massive shield to block the attack. The Dark Princess smirked and told the kid he was getting exactly what he deserved. She lunged at him again. Razel realized he'd brought this all on himself. So her attack hit the guy but bounced straight back at her, leaving Mercia totally freaked out and screaming that there's no way that just happened. She threw Mercy out the window, dodged the hit while swearing under her breath, and finally let out a huge sigh of relief once she realized she was safe. Razel just smirked and asked if they were really sure about this, because he decided it was finally time to hit back. Out of nowhere, a thick black mist swallowed the girl up, and Mercia quickly covered her face thinking it was some kind of deadly poison gas. She coughed a little, and Razel totally agreed, deciding she could use the same antidote magic he did. The Dark Princess just smirked while charging up a massive energy ball, and Razel was totally shocked to realize this wasn't just some basic cure. Mercia charged at the boy, screaming for him to disappear, and Razel was instantly trapped by her crazy power. The Dark Princess stared at him in total shock, asking what just happened, while Razel just smirked, wondering if that was really her best shot since he didn't have a single scratch. Mercia was totally clueless and asked how he pulled that off, wondering if he had some kind of crazy shield spell on it. Razel just smirked and told her to check his magic circle, and while Mercy was annoyed at first, she suddenly realized what was happening and let out a massive scream. She screams that it's totally unfair since she lost her target, but Razel just gives a nervous smile and says his magic can switch targets whenever he wants, making the guy laugh and point out that Mercia grabbed her head in total frustration and screamed that she definitely messed up by rushing into such a huge decision. Razel explains that you can't fake a magic circle against the hero, making it a total game changer that finally helps the girl relax a bit. Razel walked over and told her that by mixing fast attacks with his slow, heavy-hitting spells, he'd created the ultimate strategy to crush anyone in his way. The boy grins and tells her she's totally going to win if she stays sharp, saying everything finally went Mercy's way, and she's hyped to agree with him. The Princess of Darkness flashed a massive grin and promised to go all out, sealing the deal with a solid fist bump. After grabbing a snack, Mercia told the guy she actually had a blast training, and even though he was totally shocked, she promised she was dead serious about it. She starts gushing about how hyped she is to learn new stuff like protective magic, and Razel just smiles, saying he's glad, but then he admits he was actually scared she'd. The Princess of Darkness was super hyped to tell Razel she's officially his new bestie since she always keeps her word. And Razel didn't even hesitate to agree because his old crew just isn't the same anymore. Razel says the sandwich is fire, so the girl happily tells him that she and Jack made it together. Razel's totally shocked that a demon can actually cook, but Mercia lets him know Jack is one of the top chefs in the castle. Razel realizes it all makes sense now and thinks to himself that looks can definitely be deceiving. Murky let out a huge stretch, totally wiped out, as Razel finally called it quits and told him they were heading home. Suddenly, a massive shadow fell right over them, and they both looked up in total shock. Suddenly, a giant mouth and eyes popped up right in front of them, and the dragon roared, asking how they dared to wake him up. The Dark Princess stared at the beast in total shock and yelled that it was a dragon. But Razel just looked at her confused and asked if she even knew what a real dragon looked like. Mercia looked at the guy and straight up asked if he was an idiot. Then she corrected herself, saying obviously that wasn't it. She mentioned she'd actually never even know. The princess got dead serious and told them that 10,000 years ago, a massive dragon completely wiped out the entire civilization living here. She explained that the survivors of that dragon storm brought peace back to the land, and their descendants are still here today because they know better than to wake those sleeping beasts. Mercia tells us that this beast is actually called the Sleeping Ancient Dragon. The Princess of Darkness gave the dragon a dead serious look and warned him they'd woken up something totally terrifying, while Razel just let out a huge sigh and started overthinking everything. He got super serious and told her it was the worst because he hated being woken up, which totally caught her off guard. Razel was super hyped and asked if he could just smack the dragon again to knock it back out. But Merci yelled that he was totally insane and that this was no time for jokes, right? The grumpy dragon snapped at the couple for whispering, calling them little troublemakers and demanding they keep their eyes on him because looking away is totally disrespectful. He was totally clueless, but he still yelled that they'd regret messing with him while the dragon started charging up a massive blast. Just then, Mercia remembered Razel's warning and slammed on the absorption shield right as the dragon lunged straight for them. As the smoke clears, the Dark Princess shouts in total shock that her plan actually worked. The dragon was totally caught off guard, and Razel just gave her a smirk, saying she was already way more powerful than the beast, leaving Mercia to stare at her hands in total shock and wonder if she actually pulled that off. Razel was totally sure Mercia could take down a dragon like that in a heartbeat, and the girl even bragged she could crush a sleeping one with her bare hands, but the dragon just glared and told them they only survived that last hit because of pure luck. The Pact of Man and Beast says if that sleeping dragon wakes up, the heroes have to take it down, and the demons promise they won't backstab humans any more than they already do. The princess burst out laughing with a wicked grin, shouting that if they took this guy down, that trashy contract would finally be broken, and as she claimed she was taking his body. She laughed again and bragged about looking like a total demon lord. He gave her a grin and told Mercier she had to push way harder to become a true hero. But since this was her first real fight, he was honestly super proud of her. She grins and says her very first fight is going to be against a real dragon. She knows for a fact that nobody is going to believe her. The dragon is absolutely fuming because of how cocky they've been. The monster stood up and roared that he'd burn them all to a crisp, but Mercy just smirked and promised to take him down for the sake of the demon's future. She threw her arms wide with a big grin as massive spikes erupted all around her, and with a cold glare at the monster, she instantly summoned a magical spear. This dragon wasn't slowing down for anyone, and he started charging a massive blast of fire in his throat to finish the boys off for good, growling that they totally deserved every bit of his. He unleashed everything he had on the killers, and Mercia jumped right in to blast the dragon, triggering a massive explosion that covered the whole area in thick smoke. As the smoke and dust finally clear, the dragon's legs appear for a split second before the whole beast just crashes into the dirt. She stared down at the monster's body, looked around in total shock, and asked if it was finally over and if she actually won. Razel let out a nervous laugh, totally shocked by how fast Mercy was leveling up, while also realizing this dragon was actually a total weakling. Mercia walked right up to the monster and said they had to finish it off before it could wake back up, making Razor realize he really liked how fearless she was. He leaned in to ask what she wanted with the dragon's corpse, and Mercy shouted that they'd use it as a massive bargaining chip to make the humans listen. Mercia leaned over the dragon's body to check it out, wondering if this was enough proof to make everyone believe they actually took the beast down themselves. She asked Arisel if they could use this to craft some insane magic items. She knew that loot from a 1,000-year-old dragon was way too valuable to waste. She double-checked to Piet. Suddenly, he lets out a massive sigh and says he remembers everything now, realizing it's all just like it was before. Merci turns to him, wondering what's up, and when Mercia was totally hyped, so she looked at the boy and begged him to tell her what it was right now. Razel gave her a warm smile and told her to take it easy, saying he'd need her help and was ready to spill all the details before jumping right into his story. Once it got dark and the moon showed up, the Demon King's castle was getting seriously rowdy. She stared at the gift in total shock, asking if it was actually for her, and even though she loved it, She had no clue why he was being so nice, but Mercier just... Rizal shyly agreed with a sigh, but then a weapon suddenly appeared out of thin air, and as the girl stared at it in total awe, Rizal explained it was a magic sword forged from a sleeping dragon. He explained that once she pours her magic into the blade, a protective shield pops up, and since it's powered by mercy spells, only her actual family can use it. Basically, this sword is a one-of-a-kind weapon that only she can use. But she jumps up and yells that she can't accept something so legendary, especially since she... Mercia took a deep breath and called out to her little sister, looking totally serious as she faced her. She suddenly gives her sister a warm smile and says that even if she beats these heroes, there's no guarantee a second or third one won't just show up later. She stared at her sister for a second, then asked if she was seriously going to take out the other heroes instead of Mercy. Right then, she started to feel super nervous as it finally hit her. Without Mercia around, she'd have to handle the whole fight all by herself. She gripped her weapon tight, stared straight ahead, and realized she had to call the shots now, telling them she totally got it and would be super grateful for their help. She gave a warm smile and admitted she's actually pretty bad with a sword, so she stashed it in her magic storage while Razel just laughed, reminding her that he wasn't the one who actually took down the dragon this time. Xia Xil was totally caught off guard and asked what was happening. But then it all clicked and she looked at her sister to see if she was right, so Merci just smirked with pride and Xia Xiel took a deep breath and felt super proud of how great everything was. And while Merci totally agreed, Razel ruined the vibe by whispering about how scared the princess used to be, making her... She looks at the guys in total shock, asking if they really used every single dragon part just for this one sword while she waits for them to answer. Merci gave the thumbs up, and a super hyped Li told everyone they had enough supplies left to throw a massive party. Xia Xiel totally freaked out saying a dragon feast was way too much, but she couldn't hide how hyped she actually was. And then Merci suggested they invite all the castle servants. Xia Xiel grinned and said the castle staff would help prep the dragon meat, but Merci insisted Rizzoli should handle it, while Razel promised to make sure everything turned out perfect. After a quick setup, a huge crowd packed into this massive hall, and while everyone was buzzing, a giant table right in the middle was piled high with tons of food. She told everyone they were all going to feast on dragon meat. She never thought a day like this would actually come. Even though the meat was delicious, Mercier still couldn't believe this was... Razel points out that active dragons are usually tough, but since this one slept for ages, the meat is actually super tender and delicious. Mercia finally finished her training and took the beast down. She promised to do whatever it takes to make her creation last forever. Then she looked up and warned that the real fight was just about to start, asking if that was actually true. Razel confirmed it, dead serious as he told them that even dragons are nothing compared to the insane power of the fusion heroes. Mercier says she totally gets it. Because behind every squad of heroes, there's always some sneaky goddess pulling the strings. This woman has been playing everyone from the shadows for thousands of Shaishil looked up and told everyone they had to keep their cool and stay in line, while Razel just closed his eyes and agreed she was 100% right. She flashed the guys a smile and told them she's totally sure they can handle whatever's coming as long as they're together. Mercia smiled and said she's leaving this world for good after the battle, and while she's setting up a peace deal with the Xial, she warned the girl to never let them push her around. She gave this super creepy smile and said they could trust her since she spends every single day dreaming about hunting people, and now she's actually wondering what would happen if she just let her powers go wild. Razel and Merzia were instantly terrified by Xia Xiel's reaction, especially since the Princess of Darkness was sweating bullets and admitting she had to leave everything up to her sister. The Demon King's castle was still popping off, with a massive party bringing demons together to just hang out and have a blast. Mercia flopped onto the sofa with a huge grin, swearing she was way too full to eat another bite. Razel laughed because he couldn't believe she was actually the mistress of demons, but Mercy just looked back and said it's because she's already full. Then she ran to her sister and teased her for being so careless. Out of nowhere, Razel and Mercia felt something totally off, froze in their tracks, and listened close to figure out what just went down. Razel asked the girls if they saw what just happened, and Merci confirmed it, pointing out 3 guys standing right by the main gate. Everyone started asking around to see if anyone recognized these guys, and Razel said that even though he couldn't tell how strong they were, he was positive he knew who they were. He figured out these guys were the heroes, and right there at the gate stood Fraud the office worker, Rio the adventurer, and Banzo the mercenary, all looking super nervous. Frodo smirks and confirms they've finally reached the Demon Lord's castle, making Banza totally freeze up, while Riol just laughs at how annoyed he looks that the whole trip only took a few months. The adventurer flexes his muscles with a huge grin, declaring their target is the demon lord himself, and he's going to show him what he's made of. But Banda gets super worried and tells him to hold on a sec. He took a deep breath, knowing he was in huge trouble, and even though he'd already said way too much, it wasn't going to change a thing. Riol marched right up to the castle gates and screamed at the demons to bring their boss out right now, and he was dead serious. The guards whipped out their swords, demanding to know what was going on and who these orcs even were. They made it clear that these guys were never stepping foot inside the castle. Rayla, the real guy, flexed his muscles and told the guard he was basically begging for a beatdown, asking one last time if the demon was finally going to go get its master. The guard didn't budge, swearing he'd protect that gate even if he died trying. She looked at it totally freaked out and said things were getting way too serious. So Rysel suggested it was finally time to head outside, and Mercia just sighed and agreed they had no. Razel jokes that he'd be dead by now if he really felt that way, but since he still looks exactly the same, Merci tells him he needs a new outfit, and he actually agrees. The hero suddenly dropped into a fighting stance to take down the demon, while the guard raised his weapon for a total showdown, and both Riol and the guard started screaming their heads off to bait the hero into attacking first. They both lunged forward, but right before their rifles could hit, a huge explosion went off and forced them to stop cold. Riol snapped back and asked what the heck just happened, while Fraud and Banza rushed over to the group looking totally freaked out to see if he was actually okay. Suddenly, a massive cocoon of magic just floats right in front of the guard and the heroes, making the guard snap to attention and shout that it's magic. Right then, the cocoon burst open and two people stepped out, while Mercia gave them a chilling look and asked if they even realized where they were. Riol looked away in total shock, shouting that the master had finally shown up, while Benz warned that just one step from a hero could wipe them both out. The castle guards bowed low to Mercia and apologized like crazy, promising to round up their warriors and crush the enemy right now, but she just told them to chill and not even worry about it. The Princess of Darkness stared down the intruders and said she wanted to talk, and while Vonzo wasn't sure if they'd get along, he figured they might actually score some useful info from. Riol was super annoyed and snapped at the princess for her attitude, but Bonza held him back and told him to chill, while the hero, looking pretty nervous, said he had a plan and needed a second. Bonza turned to Mercia, admitted they weren't from this world, and apologized for being so rude. He told her she clearly looked like a big deal among the demons and said he had one. Bonza sounded totally desperate and worried he was being rude, but he still begged the girl to just hear him out. Riol was super skeptical and asked if this was seriously the plan, while Fraud wasn't so sure, but said they should just trust the hero since he's usually a genius at coming up with ideas. Mercia used her mind powers to snap at Rizal, telling him they were already in the castle and she was done arguing. Then Rizal finally realized what was really going on with all these. Right then, the hero cuts Razel and Mercia off to ask if they know anything about the brave man from the synthesis, leaving the couple totally stunned. The girl looked totally down as she asked if they really knew those words, and Bonza was completely shocked that she knew them too. The Dark Princess looked at Razel and asked what the plan was, but he told her it was her call to make, and she just nodded, saying she totally got it. Merci turned around and told everyone they were moving out right now, and while Razel was totally down with the plan, Banza was left looking completely stunned. Both the real guy and the fake one walked up to Hatsi to demand answers about what was going on. The real one wanted to know why any of this was even happening. Meanwhile, a super Santi. Suddenly, a massive seal appeared right over the heroes' heads, catching everyone totally off guard. Riol spun around in a total panic asking what was happening. Frodo admitted he'd never seen a magic circle this massive or complicated before. Riol screamed that they didn't have time to chat. The heroes started losing their minds, screaming that they'd been played since there's no way demons would ever talk things out, and pretty soon everyone else realized they'd been totally scammed too. The guys shouted as the light above them got super bright, and right then, the girl turned to the summoned heroes and told them to look up. The heroes were totally shocked to see the girl standing right in front of them, and they just froze in their tracks. Merci greeted the group with a big smile and told them the summoned heroes were already waiting in the Demon Lord's audience hall. A girl suddenly appears and tells them she's the Queen of Demons, while Razel just stands there following her every move. Banza's jaw dropped seeing them in the audience hall. Fraud was losing it over her crazy teleportation skills, and Rial freaked out asking if that guy was actually the Demon Lord. The Dark Princess smirked at the heroes and said she'd reveal the world's secrets, and after she told them to ask away, Bonsa immediately demanded the bishop explain what heroic synthesis is and why they were even summoned. The Demon Lady explains how dozens of heroes were summoned and fused into one ultimate warrior, creating humanity's greatest weapon, and the demon's worst nightmare. Bonzo's jaw dropped as he realized he was actually telling the truth. And right then, another hero started screaming that they'd all been played, while Real wasn't having. Mercia sat on her throne and said she totally got why he didn't trust her. But since he's such a hothead, he really needs to chill out and be patient. Roselle looks them in the eye and says it's been way too long, but Real is totally on edge and asks who he is. So the guy admits he's hard to recognize right as his disguise starts to melt away. Roselle suddenly appears and asks the heroes how they're holding up. The kid tells them he's got something to show them. Banza screams in surprise because it's the exact same. Roselle was super suspicious and asked if this was another trick, wondering why the hero didn't just check for himself while he worked on his invention, when suddenly a tiny camera popped right into the boy. Banza's jaw dropped as he asked if that was really the king's office. Froud was totally blown away by how realistic the painting looked, and Riol was just confused, demanding to. They look at the painting and ask who the guy in front of the king is, but the hero realizes he's never seen him in the palace before, and Merci just smirks, saying that actually makes things way easier. The Demon Lord claims they actually built this hero from scratch, but Frodo is totally calling Cap because he thinks she's just a normal girl. He's sure she tricked the other two. The kid points at the screen asking if they see the numbers, and as the heroes wonder what's up, Rizel explains it's his first ever battle stat since landing in this world. The scammer was totally losing it, asking how they even summoned such a beast, and he couldn't believe this guy's power was actually the combined strength of every hero they'd called out so far. The Princess of Darkness says heroes have been summoned since the start, but every single one of them just became food for this monster. Vanza loses it, shouting that there's no way they're trapped in this world forever, while Froud breaks down in tears because he'll never see his family again. The hero panics about what to do next, and Real just starts cursing everyone out in a total rage. Merci looked them in the eye and got serious, saying, humans have been crushing demons for years because they're stronger and have the numbers, and that's just the cold, hard truth of their world. She was totally fuming, yelling about how they'd been treated like garbage for years and how her friends and home were done dirty, swearing she'd never forgive humanity for what they did. Right then, Bonds dropped to his knees and begged the girl for even the smallest bit of help. Our hero started yelling that he'd take any job you threw at him, from impossible missions to tiny errands, because he was down to do absolutely whatever he was told. The demoness stared at the boys and asked what the other heroes thought of her, but while Frodo stayed quiet, Real just looked totally disgusted. Suddenly, the trickster leaned in and agreed, which totally shocked the hero, but the trickster just apologized and said he'd do whatever it takes to finally get back home. Real was fuming on the inside but still bowed, while Banza turned to the demon mistress and begged her to have mercy and save them. Mercia flashed a massive grin at the heroes and told them it was finally time for their very first mission. The Demon Queen told the heroes they all had to die, and the guys were so stunned they just stood there with their jaws on the floor. Back in the kingdom, word spread that those crazy daredevils started a massive fight in the Demonlands and ended up killing them. So now everyone's worried the demons are going to charge them with murder. The report says their total carelessness actually caused a death, so now they're looking at least a year behind bars. The king looked totally annoyed as he checked the report and admitted it was actually fair. He was stoked that nobody started whining for a retrial, and just as the king mentioned how annoying demon drama is, a glowing ring suddenly popped up right over his head. Something moved above him, making the guy snap his head up. Right then, he let out a massive scream and started cursing. He crashed to the floor holding his head, panicking, and bodies were piled up right in front of the king, and some guy was totally losing his mind, stuttering and screaming that they were all dead. He spotted massive holes right in their stomachs, leaving the king totally stunned that they even showed up at his office. And as his vision started fading, he realized this whole thing was a straight-up nightmare. Just a few hours ago, the summoned heroes met up at the Demon Lord's castle, where the Princess of Darkness gave them their very first mission. They all have to die for her. The heroes were totally stunned and asked if the girl had actually played them, while Banza demanded to know what was going on. Mercier just shrugged and said she was only telling the truth, while a super nervous Razel begged her to stop picking on him, making her mumble something back as she thought it over. The Dark Princess burst out laughing and totally agreed with him, saying she'd already seen those heroes looking like total idiots, while Riel stood there completely shocked asking what just happened. Riel got super annoyed and asked if she thought they were a joke. Razel could tell he was totally triggered, but Mercia just laughed it off and said she thought the whole thing was. Bonza shouted for the hero with a huge grin, but Riol admitted he wasn't some super genius who gets everything instantly, so he asked her to break it down in the simplest way possible. Merci looked at him in total shock and told him to stop selling himself short. admitting she actually really likes honest guys like him. The Princess of Darkness turned to Aracel and asked him to explain everything to the group, and he was totally down to help her out. Razel starts explaining how the heroes heard he was dead, and asks the crew how they think he tricked the kings and his pursuers. Frodo guesses it was some crazy magic banza. Rasal admits he hid the body, leaving the heroes totally stunned. They think he's acting super sus, but Deception says he knows exactly where this is going. Riol was totally shocked and asked what was going on, so Frodo explained the guy actually had a second body, and Banza realized this dude was definitely a murderer. Razel cuts them off to claim he hasn't killed a single soul in this world and even has a body ready for himself, but Mercia just laughs because she doesn't believe a word of. Frodo's jaw dropped as he asked if the kid was serious about having a whole other body, while Bonza just rolled his eyes and called the entire story a load of total nonsense. Real started. Rizel used these special stem cells to make a perfect clone of himself. This is the exact same magic Frodo used, and it's even linked to how they cloned that kid Fuko. So here's the deal. If you die in a fight, your mind just jumps into a new body. And while he's hyped that even a clone keeps you alive, he starts questioning. Frodo says it's totally messed up. Bonza wonders if cloning is even right. Riola gets the creeps thinking about a twin standing right next to him, and Razel realizes their options are. Suddenly, he let out a massive roar to wrap things up, and it was so loud the other guys were totally freaked out. Razel says they're using clones this time, and he doesn't care what anyone thinks because he's finishing the job. But then Mercia jumps in and awkwardly asks if they even need that guy's permission anyway. This was some next-level cloning magic. These clones looked so real that the heroes were totally blown away. Razel reminded everyone that their bodies were already shut down. Then the guy explained he was using. Froud asked what the deal was with the decoy bodies since leaving them in public was way too risky. And while Bonsa worried they'd just rot if they were hidden in the wild, Razel told them he had a genius way to fix the whole problem. Razel told the heroes he'd send the bodies straight to the king's office, and Mercia said she'd use her magic to attach a secret letter to. A bit later, someone was nervously trying to wake the king up in his room, but he just frowned and mumbled something back. Regis rushed over to the king, hyped to see he was already wide awake. The king signaled for Regis to come closer. The servant told him he heard crazy screaming and sprinted over. The king was totally wiped out as he checked the bodies, but then his eyes snapped open and he demanded to know what kind of corpses they actually were. Regis confirmed those were the 3 heroes he sent to the Demon Lord's castle, and the king realized the Demon Lord had finally gone way too far, wondering if it was too early to send. The servant handed the king a tiny gadget and told him the answer was right inside, but the king just scowled and asked what the heck it even was. Regius says they found this weird object and a letter right next to the corpse. He thinks it's actually some kind of teleporter for summoned heroes. The servant explains that this device, the king totally went off on the demons for kidnapping the legendary sage. He told them they never could have built that crazy machine without the sage's help. Then the guy asked Regis. The letter said it was time to get cooking, so they sent the sacrificed heroes back. And after the girl bragged about killing the ancient dragon and ending their deal, the food trade stopped and everyone knew that seeing those heroes meant war was officially on. The king absolutely lost it after reading that letter, crushing the paper in his fist and screaming that it was a total insult. He was fuming that they wanted to change the deal, yelling if flawed. The king started getting paranoid that they were just trying to trash his name and steal his throne, so he sat there fuming and cursing the girl and her whole squad in his head. He called up Regius and told him to get those artificial heroes ready for war, then sent them straight back to the Demon Lord with a message that they were going to burn his whole land to the ground. The queen got the chills and told the king the demons were acting super sus, so they should definitely send some scouts to see what was really going down. The king gave Regis a nasty look and asked if he was seriously trying to pick a fight, threatening to end him right then and there until a terrified Regis finally backed down and promised to do exactly what. The king was totally fuming that the Demon Lord forgot his place, so he decided to send in some fresh heroes to remind him who really runs the show. Crazy laughter echoed through the pitch-black castle, and the king decided it was finally time to shut it down. The Princess of Darkness started laughing about how everyone was staring, bragging that the king totally fell for her tricks and went all quiet, while Banza was shocked that this supposed Demon Lord acted just like a. Razel says the king ignores everyone unless you insult his pride, but Mercia just laughs, thinking nobody would actually dare to say that to his face. The demon lady let out a satisfied sigh, feeling like she finally nailed it, while Razel grinned and told her she actually pulled it off, and the boy added that he'd be showing up real soon. Riol was totally stuck. and had no clue what to do next now that the truth was finally out. Fraud felt super awkward and admitted he was actually pretty ashamed of what he did. Ban. Mercia was just glad they got caught before that synthesis thing could even start. Riol pointed out how weird the whole thing sounded. Fraud agreed, saying it was basically nothing compared to cloning. Ever. Suddenly, a knock hits the door, and while Razel's wondering who it is, a guy shows up with a teleportation book that Razel takes right away. The servant mentioned a letter had just arrived, so Mercia took it and thanked him for doing a great job. She gave him a quick smile and said she'd let him know if she needed anything. The Princess of Darkness was dying to know what the letter said, so she opened it up, read every word, and said she totally got it. Razel asked what was up with the king and if they got what they came for, so the girl just grinned and told him everything went perfect. Mercia reveals that in 1 month, the king is sending Hera to the western desert of Monorisu to take down the Demon Lord for breaking a specific rule in their peace treaty. Riol says the war is finally starting. Proud admits he's never been this nervous, and Banza says he's never had to go up against someone this much stronger than him. Right then, the Demon Lord glares at them and asks what they're whispering about, but Razel tells him he's staying out of their way this time. Riol, Fraud, and Banza stared at the couple in total shock, completely blown away by the news they just heard. Razel says they only need a tiny crew for this war since the goal is to flex their synthetic heroes, crush the Demon King, and rule the demons, and he's totally sure. Mercia broke down her plan to use this to her advantage by targeting the synthetic heroes, humanity's strongest weapon, to finally crush their massive egos. The summoned heroes stared at the girl in total shock, trying to figure out what she even meant by that. The Demon Lord bragged that she and her squad of artificial heroes were going to handle the whole fight alone. Inside his massive castle, Demon Lord Razel let out a heavy sigh and decided to just leave everything exactly how it is for now. This scruffy monk spots the kid and gives him a quick, "Good morning." Our hero asks Razel what he's even doing out here. The kid says he's getting ready. Banzo nods and says things are finally heating up. Then he spots a weird device and asks if that's how the kid is getting ready. Razel explains it's a magic artifact that broadcasts. Our hero was totally blown away that these things were set up all over the place. He asked the guy if he seriously had enough magic stones to power every single one. Banzo was just praying that each... Banzo realized the final battle was only set yesterday, so seeing all these artifacts made in just 1 day totally blew his mind and proved this guy was way more dangerous than the Dark Princess. Our hero asks Ryza why he's even leaking this, and he just says he wants the whole world to watch the hero go head-to-head with the Princes of Darkness. Banza asked why he needed this, so Razel explained that once everyone sees her crazy power, they'll be way too scared to even touch her, even when the princess isn't around to back her up. The hero was totally stunned by the kid's answer and asked why she wouldn't be around, while the boy figured the Princess of Darkness was heading somewhere else. But then Razel. Banzo was totally blown away, wondering if there was actually someone out there who could beat Razel when their strongest heroes couldn't even lay a finger on him. The hero looked at the kid and was just glad they didn't start a fight, so he offered to help and Razel thanked him for it. A little while later, she started counting right into the mic to test out her voice. A crowd started gathering to see what all the noise was about. They knew it was Saren right away because her voice was super easy to hear. Zarina turned to the group of demons and thanked them. A demon girl pops up on the screen, pointing out the massive army waiting for them with a smirk. She introduces herself as Zarina from the Princess of Darkness's guard and says she'll be narrating all the action today. Razel looked at the army and realized it was way smaller than he expected, so Mercy guessed people think demons are pushovers. But the Princess of Darkness said it was time to show everyone who's really in charge. Just then, a guy walks up and says the demons are bragging about their flying, asking why there are only 2 of them and grumbling that they're being totally looked down on. Suddenly, a guy in full knight armor steps up to greet Mercy, telling her it's been way too long and that the Princess of Darkness has grown up to be a total beauty. Mercy shut him down, saying his praise meant nothing if he couldn't even remember her name, and she didn't see a goddess anywhere, but the guy just laughed it off. The Princess of Darkness asked Razel if the goddess was close, and he told her she was just watching for fun, so they realized they were totally on their own. Razel realized the goddess wasn't actually going to strike, and he immediately figured out what her game was. Suddenly, the guy shouts that he just remembered something huge. He tells her he's got to leave her there all by herself. He's sure she can handle it, though. He jokes. Mercia let out an annoyed sigh, but then she smiled and told him he would have left even if she asked him to stay, so she just asked if that was true and told. The Princess of Darkness chilled out and promised she'd have everything handled by the time he got back, and as Razel started vanishing into thin air, he just smiled and said he'd be totally down for that. The hero flashed a grin and shouted, "Wait, you're really doing this alone?" He mocked her, asking if the whole demon race had abandoned her, saying that might be her only shot at winning, but Merci just stared him down without saying a word. Out of nowhere, the Princess of Darkness starts cracking up, leaving the hero totally confused as he asks her what could possibly be so funny. Merci smirked, saying she finally saw the huge gap in their power and couldn't believe she was ever scared of such a weakling, looking him right in the eyes and laughing at how pathetic it was. The hero totally flipped out, shouting that he was a complete weakling and asking if that girl was seriously talking about him. Suddenly, the kid's whole vibe shifted as he told Knight he'd handle this alone, warning everyone to stay out of it, and Knight backed off instant. Dark energy swirled around the princess as she mocked the hero for being dumb enough to fall for such a basic trap. Mercia waved her hand and screamed that the hero was toast, and the boy charged straight into the fight with everything he had. The hero gave a cocky smirk as he slashed his sword through the air, shouting that he'd have the whole fight finished in just 10 seconds. Mercia blocked the hero's attack like it was nothing. Then she looked up as the sky turned dark and lightning started to strike. Out of nowhere, a bolt of lightning slammed right into the kid, and he let out a massive scream as the shock hit him. Blood started hitting the floor. The hero gave the girl a total death stare and cursed her out. Merci just looked at him like he was nothing and asked if he was seriously still trying to fight. The hero just grins and says a scratch like that is an easy fix, but he doesn't even get to finish before the girl takes her next step. Out of nowhere, massive explosions blasted right over his head, and he looked up instantly to see what was going on. Mercia snapped her fingers right as the boy was joking about her clapping, and in an instant he got hit so fast he didn't even know what happened. Blood sprays right out of the hero's mouth. He can't believe how fast everything just went down. The girl doesn't waste a second before blasting him with magic. The Princess of Darkness blasted her energy right at the boy, and he actually smiled, thinking she was helping him heal his wounds. He was just about to say what he'd do next, but Mercy's power started surging through the boy's wound, and as he panicked and asked what was going on, she just calmly told him it was meant to be, thinking that was all. The Princess of Darkness looked down at the beat-up hero and told him straight up that she's just way stronger than him. End of story. Our hero was totally spent and started to vanish, and as the boy said everything went down exactly as planned, he hit the floor and his body dissolved into nothing but a skeleton. Merci watched the whole thing with a totally blank face, and after a few seconds, she just straight up said she was bored. A soldier from the hero's squad rushes over to the kid in total shock, and even though he tries calling out the hero's name, he gets absolutely no response. Zarina saw what happened and started cheering like crazy, shouting that the hero got the most ridiculous ending ever. Zarina screamed that the Princess of Darkness definitely won, and the whole crowd started going wild for her. The demoness told everyone the stream was wrapping up, gave a quick shout out to the Princess of Darkness, and then the feed just cut to black. Mercia whipped around to face the guy and asked if he caught all that, bragging about how fast she took care of things, while Razel just smirked, told her she did an awesome job. Mercia gave him a smile and asked what he was even doing there, but Razel just grinned back and acted totally innocent until he casually admitted he'd just swiped a legendary hero's eye. She was totally shocked and asked if it was really the same artifact, but he just grinned and told her he could never just walk away from a friend. Mercia was dying to try it out right then, but Razel dropped his disguise and told her she had to wait until everyone else cleared out. Razel looked straight up at the sky and called out to God. He yelled that he knew God was watching his every move. He screamed that he'd stolen the hero's treasure. Razel looked around as the Princess of Darkness bragged that their bait worked, even though God was still a no-show. Mercia was totally losing it over how much they spent, but the boy just smiled and told her everything was fine. He promised that very soon, he'd make sure God had no choice but to show up. Merci looked at Razel, wondering if he was really starting right now, and he just turned to her with a big grin and said, yeah. This kid was dead set on his wild plan to experiment on himself and fuse straight into the hero. Mercia just smiled and said she knew he'd leave even if she asked him to stay, so she told him to just get going and promised to have everything finished by the time he got back. And Razor said she'd be super happy, and as he walked away, he knew she was so talented she'd be just fine on her own. The kid saw the security was finally slacking and realized he could swipe the synthesizer right from under the hero's noses. Razel scanned the map and realized the device had to be hidden right in this spot. A bit later, he stepped into the shut room and looked around, realizing the place was totally empty. Razel spotted the device in the middle of the room and realized the coast was clear, so he just grabbed it, knowing everyone else had totally underestimated how big of a deal it was. Razel just stared at the device in his hands, thinking nobody was actually going to show up, and he was honestly pretty annoyed that getting it had been way too easy. He finally chilled out once he realized he'd have way more free time. Right then, something totally caught his eye and left him completely shocked. He started smirking, already imagining all the crazy. Then the kid headed back to the Princess of Darkness, who was just staring at the exhausted hero and wondering if he was finally finished. Mercia asked Razel if he saw her finish the fight so fast, and he told her it looked awesome while mentioning he was done with his own business too. When Mercia wondered what that other guy was up to, Razel just said he didn't do anything too crazy. He just swiped a hero's artifact. The Princess of Darkness was totally shocked, asking if this was really the same artifact, and the boy confidently told her they couldn't just leave it like that. She was dying to test it. Right then, Rizal looked up and shouted that God sees everything, declaring that since he finally has the hero's relic, it's time for him to show up. Mercia's totally confused why God hasn't shown up, but the boy tells her it's fine their summoning failed because he's about to force God to appear himself. Rizal acted super confident as he announced he was starting an experiment to fuse himself with the hero. Mercia was super confused because the experiment wasn't even about her. It was about some random guy, so she decided to get some answers. Razel explains that this artifact basically steals magic from one person and gives it to another to make it even stronger. So Mercia listens closely and asks if she should be the one getting the power boost instead of him. The boy looked totally shocked and asked Mercy if she seriously didn't notice a thing, but she just gave him a massive side-eye. Razel straight up admits that she's got more magic than him, and Mercy is totally shocked because she never thought she could actually be stronger. Razel tells her she's already a beast and is only going to get crazier, reminding her she needs a partner to watch her back in battle, while Mercia realizes this guy is actually her friend. He told her he wasn't kidding around because he refused to let her be weaker than him, explaining that he couldn't stand being a useless nobody anymore, and Mercia totally got where he was coming from. Razel drops a bombshell that this gadget is hiding another massive secret. The girl is totally caught off guard by the news. The boy guesses that it's all connected to the goddess somehow. Mercia freaked out and asked, what if the goddess tried to hijack the boy's brain? But Razel just shrugged it off, saying he's such a pro at mind magic that The princess was totally fed up that the guy just did his own thing anyway. But then Razel finally admitted he actually really wanted to give it a shot. Razel was super curious and said he'd only know if it worked by trying it, but Mercy just glared and told him he has no survival instincts at all. The guy was so hyped to finally try it, and the girl knew that if she gave him a big yes right now, he'd probably just burst from pure joy. Razel held up the device and gave the signal to start, and instantly, the fallen hero's body was swallowed by a huge wave of energy. He's just holding the device when it suddenly starts surging with power, and he's completely blown away. Mercia stood right next to him, shielding her eyes from the crazy bright light glowing off the kid. Razel closed his eyes and decided the launch was going great, feeling totally sure that nobody was messing with his head. The Princess of Darkness hyped up and asked how things were going, so Razel told her the magic power was totally off the charts, but he's got it all under control. The guy flashed a huge smile and told her they actually did it. The experiment worked. Mercia spotted the boy with the lantern and let out a huge shout of joy because she totally thought this was impossible. Suddenly, Razel and the girl spotted a guy standing right in front of them, and when Razel asked if he was the army's commander, the girl agreed, but the man he was totally shocked and demanded to know where they even found that thing. Razel and Mercia just stood there with huge, satisfied grins on their faces. The guy bragged that Mercia drops down right in front of the guy and tells him to stop being mad and just get this scroll to the king. And when he asks what it is, she tells him it's the official surrender of the entire human race. The commander started tearing up, saying that if he told the king, he'd either be executed on the spot or tortured so badly that he'd actually beg for death. The princess asked if he was really that scared of the king, threatening to slice off his head and send it to the capital with the hero's body until the guy totally lost it and said he got the message. The guy runs off freaking out, but the girl screams that they'll reach the capital and save him before his execution, and the commander even tells them they better show up. The soldiers stared at their commander in total shock, asking what went wrong, but he just told them they were pulling back and to stop asking questions. Razel asks Mercy if the guy can really pull off the delivery, and she's totally sure he's got this. But then she notices the commander's intense look that basically screams they have. The Princess of Darkness just gave an awkward wave and a laugh, claiming she already knew everything and that nothing could change the situation. Razel agreed they definitely needed more time. while Mercia watched the army retreat and asked if they should use teleportation magic to back them up. Razel stared at his hand and told Mercia he was hyped to try a brand new magic trick. And after thinking it over for a second, she nodded and said she totally got what he was planning. Razel just gives the annoyed girl a friendly smile and asks what's up, wondering if she's in a bad mood. But Mercia twirls her hair and complains that The guy looked at the Princess of Darkness with a huge grin, held up a finger, and told her not to worry because he had a secret plan, making Mercia gasp in total shock as she asked what he was up to. Razel flashed a massive smile and told Mercy they should head back to the Princess of Darkness's castle first, mentioning that Shill and the gang had been waiting forever, and Mercy was totally down because she couldn't wait to see the shocked looks on her people's faces. After that talk, the two of them finally started heading out. They made it back home, with Mercia happily leading the way. But then Razel pointed at something and totally froze in shock. The girl looked over too and her jaw completely dropped. Inside the Demon Lord's courtyard, all the princess's knights and maids were lined up in rows, with Shishilan and Zarina right at the front, totally hyped for Mercia to finally show up. Mercia saw her crowd and dashed over with a massive smile, while Razel just hung back and gave a chill smirk with his eyes shut. The Princess of Darkness sprints over to her little sister, and a teary-eyed Shashiel lunges forward for a massive hug while the servants cheer for their big reunion. The Princess of Darkness scanned the crowd, but Jack was totally missing. And as she looked around in shock, a demon suddenly popped up right next to the sisters while they were hugging. The demon's holding a huge tray of fresh food with a massive grin, and the Dark Princess and her little sister are totally ready to dive into that hot meat. Jack bursts out laughing at the girls while the sisters stare hyped up at the giant slab of meat the demon is holding, and Razel just watches the whole thing with a grin. The guy was just watching the Princess of Darkness and her sister when she suddenly waved him over to join them. Eventually, the sisters crashed on the same bed together, and with her eyes still shut, one of them turned over and called out to her sister like she was wondering about something. Her sister looked at her with total awe, saying she actually took down a hero, and Mercia just calmly opened her eyes, stared at her hand, and said she did it all with her own 2 hands. The Princess of Darkness's little sister just listened quietly before finally admitting she was actually terrified. Her hands were shaking like crazy, but then Shishiel reached out and touched Mercia's hand. She looked at her sister worriedly and told her that her hands were the reason the whole country was safe, but her sister just smiled back, saying these were the hands of a leader to be. Mercia stared at her little sister in total shock as she repeated that this was only the first step, but it was a massive deal. She vows to protect the whole world and her kingdom even without the Princess of Darkness, while Razel secretly listens to the sisters' conversation from behind the door. A while later, a huge crowd of demons is just waiting around until the Princess of Darkness steps out onto the massive staircase to keep a close eye on all of them. The Dark Princess marched right past her servants with total confidence. Mercia stepped out onto the massive balcony like it was her own stage, and the Princess of Darkness shouted for everyone to shut up and listen. The girl happily told the crowd of demons that the hero was finally safe. She shouted that they were all free at last, but Mercia warned everyone that new dangers were still lurking around the corner. The Princess of Darkness's people started freaking out and whispering, but Mercia just smirked because she knew it was all true. And honestly, they had every reason to be scared. The Dark Princess just smirked and told her not to worry, since she was leaving someone behind for Mercia to train. She reached out and called for her sister, and the girl stepped up. Mercia announced that while she was away, her little sister Shishiel was in total control. The Princess of Darkness admitted the girl was still a rookie, but she was way better at scene. The Princess of Darkness looked at Shishiel and told her it was time to face the crowd. The girl gave a small nod before screaming at the demons to shut up and listen. She warned. Shishiel finished her speech and glared at her crew to make sure they got the message, leaving the demons frozen in fear as they stuttered out a yes, while Mercy watched in total shock, wondering if she was being way too harsh. A few days after Mercy almost turned into a popsicle, she finally asks why they're even stuck in the middle of the ocean, and Razel just tells her they're there to master the magic of self-growth. Mercia was totally caught off guard and asked if Razel really meant self-reinforcement, so he just nodded, raised his hand, and told her to back up a bit. Suddenly, a glowing magic circle bursts out under Razel's feet, and the girl notices that he's taking way longer than usual to pull this off. Out of nowhere, a blinding light exploded right in front of her. Mercier froze in total shock at the crazy sight right in front of her. She let out a shaky sigh and asked what that thing even was. Then out of nowhere, a massive scream ripped. A massive beast towered over the Princess of Darkness, and she totally freaked out, asking if that thing was seriously a dragon. Mercia was totally shocked and asked if turning into a dragon was really his way of finding himself, wondering if casting spells was hard in such a massive body, but Razel just gave a big dragon grin. Razel points a finger to confirm it, saying things are way crazier than they look. And just as a confused Mercia asks what he means, a blinding light flashes and forces her to shield her. Mercy looked him over and said he was finally human again, but then Razel put his hand on his chest and told her to look even closer, making her super suspicious about what he meant. The girl got super serious and said the magic energy had totally changed. Mercia decided the girl definitely belonged to the dragon. She explained that Razel was using a spell to look human right now. The guy just smiled and told Mercia he totally trusted her. She rubbed her nose with a grin, feeling pretty good about that. Then Razel cut in, asking Mercia about the ups and downs of. She realized that a massive dragon body is way too clunky for precise magic, while a human body can't handle those insane dragon-level spells. And then she suddenly froze as the Aya. Mercia was super hyped to explain that Razel didn't actually cancel his transformation. He just layered a human form over his dragon body, so there are zero downsides. Razel just smiled and confirmed it, saying he's still as strong as a dragon, and his huge size won't get in the way of his magic at all. The girl pouted and said she finally got it, confirming that to become a dragon, you have to take one down first, a crazy rule she never even thought of before. Mercia was freaking out about whether she could handle the crazy tech, but Razel just poked her nose and complained she was being a broken record, making her let out a surprised sigh. Razel explains that dragons are basically walking batteries of massive magic. The boy only managed to do this because he teamed up with the hero's power. He points out that the girl already had that. The guy finally cooled off and told Mercia she's way too hard on herself, but she just gave him an annoyed sigh. Razel could tell that after years of being treated like garbage, she'd just gotten used to thinking she wasn't good enough. Razel looked at Mercia and explained how doubting yourself just makes you lose your way, and she hung on every single word he said. Razel just grinned and said his real job was to help her believe in herself, and Mercia gave him a sorry smile, telling him she was totally counting on him. The guy told Mercia she needed to learn how to hype herself up first, and she loved the idea so much that Razel could instantly tell she was in a great mood. Razel tells her she's got to wear this bracelet and pulls out a shiny piece of jewelry. Mercia is totally shocked and asks what it is, so he explains it'll help. Razel was totally hyped, shouting that this bracelet would finally let her pull off the move, and Mercia cheered back, promising to give it everything she had. A bunch of time passes, and now it's pitch black over the Demon Lord's castle as a massive moon rises high above the city. Razel was hunched over a tiny table, his eyes totally glued to the screen right in front of him. The kid stared him down, let out a sigh, and reached out his finger, but then someone suddenly shouted his name and totally caught him off guard. Mercia rushed over to Razel with a massive grin, shouting that she finally pulled it off, and she was totally hyped. Mercure stood right in front of him with a massive grin, asking what he thought and shouting for him to look her way, while a shocked Razel sighed and yelled that it was totally awesome. Razel and Mercia finally reach a new spot and find a massive building that looks just like a castle. Razel is totally confused why it's even there, and Mercia is shocked, wondering if someone. As they flew closer to the spot, Raiz realized the real challenge was figuring out how to actually get inside. Suddenly, they spotted a tiny entrance that totally caught them off guard. And while the girl figured it was left open for anyone to find, Razel was shocked but decided it wasn't there. Mercia took a close look at the entrance and frowned, thinking there was a trap waiting inside, but Razel told her it was safe since he didn't feel any bad vibes at all. Razel and Mercy decided to sneak closer, and Razel told her they had to walk right into the danger zone to win, which she was totally down for. Razel stops dead in his tracks, making Mercia crash right into his back, so she peeks around him to ask why he stopped. She stared ahead in total shock, wondering where that fresh smell of grass was coming from as she asked what was even going on. They step out into this massive field with a giant tree right in the middle, and the girl totally freaks out, asking what that thing even is. Razel calmly tells her this whole place is fake, and Mercier is totally shocked because it would take an insane amount of magic that she didn't think anyone in the world could actually pull off. The kid rushes back to Mercy and tells her it's not even a person, but right then, someone creeps up behind him and the girl to ask what they need. Mercia and Razel rushed back with super serious looks on their faces, but the girl just grinned and said they let themselves in since no one was at the door, while the new guy admitted he was just way too lazy to get up and meet them. Razel took a good look at the guy and knew he was a powerful dragonborn, but the dude just gave a lazy yawn and asked everyone what they were even doing there. Mercy grinned, because she could tell this guy was a total beast, so she challenged him to a fight right then and there while Razel just smirked from the sidelines and Draconian stood there looking completely lost. He started with a soft chuckle before bursting into a loud laugh, loving that the girl skipped the sneak attack to fight him head-on. And he shouted that he totally digs people this direct while feeling zero pity for them. The girl tried to keep her cool and asked the dragon if he was down for the challenge, and after thinking it over for a second, the guy finally agreed. He stared down his guests and asked which one of them wanted to step up first. Rizal and Mercia felt the air get heavy and immediately went on guard. The girl whispered that this guy felt seriously. Mercia smirked and asked if he was down for a 2-on-1, and the Dragonite was totally hyped, saying it's been thousands of years since he's had a chance to have this much fun. Suddenly, Mercia and Rizal blasted off, and the young man wasn't about to get left behind as he zoomed right after them. The Dragonian reached out his hand and told her they could start. She warned him she wasn't holding anything back, and Razel just grinned, saying this was about to get good. Explosions started rocking the whole place as the battle kicked off, leaving Mercia stuck right in the dead center of the chaos. He reacted in a flash, leaping back to dodge the hit just as another explosion ripped through the spot where he was standing. This dragon-looking beast suddenly teleports right behind the girl, tells her to stop yawning with a wave of its hand, and then just absolutely decks her with a massive punch. The attack totally failed, and the guy just sighed with a smirk, telling Razel he'd successfully swapped places with the girl while Razel stood there wide open and smiling. Right then, he balled up his fist as this crazy dark energy started swirling around it. The guy just stared at his hand, totally shocked by what was happening. All of a sudden, the dragon guy just smirked and waved his hand, shouting that this little problem wouldn't stop him, but then he suddenly noticed a girl standing right beside him. The guy whipped around with a look of pure annoyance and cursed because he didn't even hear her sneak up, and he still had no clue where Mercia was actually located. Suddenly, he gets blindsided by an attack from the back. Then this insane magic energy wraps around him and freezes him in place, and the Dragonite just lets out a huge sigh, knowing there's... Razel sees his chance and lunges, but the guy slips right past him, drops low to guard, and immediately fires back with a strike of his own. The dragon's fist was inches from his face when the boy smirked and called out Razel's dragon magic, but Razel just played it off like he was practicing. Scales suddenly started spreading over the dragon's hand as he yelled about it happening again, wondering if the kid was trying to freeze him in place. But even as he cursed at Raz, Mercia jumped out from behind the dragon and nailed it with a kick, while Razel realized these beasts totally lose their cool in a fight, which is their biggest weakness. Draconian whipped around with a smirk, acting like that kick was totally worth it. Right then, he gets slammed right in the face and sent flying back screaming, with blood covering him instantly. Razel just smirked at the kid and told him he wasn't done yet. Then he suddenly lunged forward and drove his hand straight through the boy's body. With a massive hole right through its body, the dragon started falling from the sky, and the kids watched as it slammed into the ground with a huge crash. The dragon is slumped on the ground covered in wounds and admits he's done for, but then he reveals that Rizal and Mercia are actually from another world, leaving them both totally stunned. Razel walks right up to the dragon and asks if he really caught on, and the guy confirms it, saying those clothes make it super obvious, so the dragon decides he's going to... Rizal was totally shocked it was actually his, but the dragon just laughed and teased that his dark princess was a bit clumsy, and she just shyly agreed. Draconic flashed a smile and asked the boy for one last favor, so Razel looked over at Mercia, who just gave him a warm nod and a grin. Razel dropped to one knee to show he was down, and the second the kid grabbed the dragonling's hand, a massive wave of energy completely swallowed them up. The kid just flashed a grin and said everything went according to plan, barely containing his massive power, as he bragged about how hyped he was to finally scrap with some real heavy hitters, saying the whole fight was honestly just a blast. The guy closed his eyes with a quiet smile, and when Mercia asked if he was dead, Razel just nodded to confirm. She's totally blown away that someone this powerful actually exists, but Ritzo explains that the guy has spent every single day of his life grinding to get this good. Mercia went totally silent and looked super annoyed, feeling a sharp sting like he'd just jabbed her with a needle. The Princess of Darkness turns to Razel and tells him he needs to listen up. Razel asks her what's going on. Mercia demands to know why he finished off that little. Mercia asked if this dragon guy was the strongest one there. She wondered if she should try to get him on her side. Suddenly, Razel reached out to stop her. He told her it finally clicked for her, so she told the guy to hold on for a second. She was totally shocked and asked what kind of crazy move he taught Razel, but the guy just started laughing. The girl starts trash-talking the dragon and calling it a basic lizard, then yells at Razel to bring the guy back to life just so she can choke him out again, while Razel,